Chapter 911. Changyang Zhujiao's words were like an imperial edict, directly stripping Changyang Zhu Yinkong of any possibility of entering Changyang Prefecture. Changyang Zuyun and Changyang Zuyun Shao immediately paled. This was because they knew that their son would never be able to take a single step into the Changyang clan in the future. Changyang Zhu Yinkong did not seem to hear Changyang Zhu Zhao's words at all. He stared blankly at the forbidden grounds of Changyang Prefecture as his face was filled with confusion and confusion. Great elders, please remove the seal in Kong, Er's head, and fulfill your promise, Changyang Zuyun said as she endured her pain. He's actually become a saint ruler. How is that possible? At this moment, a great elder finally discovered that Changyang Zuyunkong had become a saint ruler and cried out in surprise. Afterward, Changyang Zhu Yinkong finally explained how he had become a saint ruler. When the great elders learned that he had used 100,000-year-old dragon saliva grass to temporarily suppress the power of the seal, they all felt relieved. Although Kong will never be able to set foot in Changyang Prefecture again, he's still a clansman of ours. Let's work together to remove the seal in Kong Er's head, Changyang Zhu Yunshao said in low spirits. Since Changyang Zhu Yunkong has become a saint ruler, there's no need to worry about his lifespan for now. In my opinion, let's keep the seal in his head for now. We'll remove the seal when he brings the descendant of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Shoten, back to the clan. That way we'll be able to redeem ourselves and answer to the several 100,000 clansmen. After all, his return has caused the Emperor armament to go berserk again. He's caused quite a lot of trouble for us, Changyang Qinyin said after some thought. Changyang Zhuyin Shao and his wife's expressions suddenly changed. Even Changyang Zhu Zhao's complexion became rather ugly. Elder Yin, I don't think that's a good idea. Last time in Lore City, we removed Kong Er's punishment in front of the other clans. Since the punishment has been removed, why haven't we removed the seal in Kong Er's head? Do you know that the existence of the seal will limit Kong Er's strength and hinder his path of cultivation? Changyang Zhu Yunshao growled. Elder Yin, I also think it's time to release Kong Er's seal, Changyang Zhu Shao added. The seal in Changyang Zuyunkong's head had been cast down by the 7 of them, so removing it required the 7 of them. Not a single one of them could be missing. Everyone, what do you think? Changyang Qinyin looked at the others. I agree with Elder Yun's opinion. I also agree with Elder Yun's opinion. The remaining great elders all expressed their opinions after a moment of thought. They all agreed with Changyang Qinyin. Changyang Zhu Yunxiao's face immediately sank. He was extremely furious. Since everyone agrees with me, let's just do it like this. When Changyang Zhu Yunkong brings Changyang Shoten back to the clan, we will remove the seal. Changyang Qinyin smiled before leaving with the other great elders. Changyang Zhu Yunshao and Changyang Zhu Shao hovered in the air with sunken faces. They were furious inside, while Changyang Zuyun sobbed by herself. She had originally thought that the great elders would immediately undo the seal in Changyang Zhu Yunkong's head after he returned to the clan, but she had never thought that the final outcome would be like this. They've gone too far. Changyang Zhu Yunshao clenched his fists tightly. He was so furious that his body began to gently tremble. Changyang Zhu Shao let out a long sigh. His face was filled with helplessness as he sighed. It's all because of the winged tiger. In the end, Changyang Zhu Yunkong failed to remove the seal, nor was he able to return to the clan. He could only return to Lore City and continue being the revered ancestor of the Changyang clan. Changyang Zuyun Shao and Changyang Zuyun did not return to the clan due to their disappointment. Instead, they chose to remain in Lore City with their son. In the blink of an eye, half a year passed. Jianchen sat on a small mountain of supreme quality crystal coins in a secret room deep underground. The sword spirits appeared above his head, assisting Jianchen in refining the crystal coins into the purest form of energy. The crystal coins were condensed from pure water-attributed energy, so they possessed the same effects as monster cores. They could rapidly increase Jianqin's strength. Jianqin had exchanged the crystal coins for a spot to enter the divine hall of the 8 wastelands. A fragment of a map could take 20 people into the divine hall of the 8 wastelands. 10 of Jianqin's spots had been taken away by His Majesty Poseidon, so the remaining 10 were completely up to him. He, newbies, and Xiao Wang only took up 3 spots. He had already sold the remaining 7 spots to exchange for things he needed. The only 2 elders of the Turtle clan who had reached the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Rulers had come to find Jianqin for the spots, hoping to obtain a chance to enter the divine hall of the 8 wastelands. However, no matter what they said, they were unable to obtain a spot from Jianqin. This was because the 2 9th heavenly layer Saint Rulers were the leaders of the 2nd and 3rd elders. They were 2 of the people who had objected to Jianqin inheriting the throne. Jianqin, obviously, would not give the precious spots to these people. He would rather use the spots to exchange for things that were useful to him. Jianqin had considered buying people's hearts before, but he felt that there was no need for him to do so. He had not come to the Turtle clan to actually become the ruler. He had only come to complete the Grand Elder's final wish. The 7 spots were sold out in just 3 short months. Jianqin had exchanged 3 spots for a tremendous amount of crystal coins, while the other 4 spots were exchanged for materials for the azulite swords. After all these years of hard work, Jianqin had already gathered over a dozen materials for the azulite swords. He was only missing 4 materials, but he had already found one of them. It was the Heaven Soulstone that belonged to the Yamahal, one of the 3 great assassination organizations on the Tianyuan continent. Once I have enough strength in the future, I'll definitely pay a visit to the Yamahal, Jianqin thought. At the same time, a vast and powerful presence suddenly radiated from the 99-floored Beast God Hall on the Beast God continent. It was like a primordial beast that had slowly awakened from its slumber. It radiated with a terrifying presence, causing the clouds in the sky to change. The entire Beast God continent was greatly affected, causing all the magical beasts to tremble on the ground. Fear and dread filled their eyes. At that moment, the 97 people cultivating in the Beast God Hall all opened their eyes. They all raised their heads in the direction of the 98th floor. Some of them rejoiced, while others became worried. Kaiser has actually broken through. The gap between us is growing wider and wider. An old man with white hair and ruddy complexion stared at the 98th floor of the Beast God Hall as he softly murmured. He frowned slightly. He was one of the 3 emperors of the Beast God continent, the holy emperor of the Peng clan, Sangqiong. On the 96th floor, Lankiros suddenly stood up. He smiled and said, 5 years have passed. Our king has finally emerged from seclusion. At this moment, a burly, 3-meter-tall man slowly walked out from the 98th floor of the Beast God Temple. The burly man's appearance was extremely ordinary, but his eyes were extremely sharp like unsheathed swords. He gave people the feeling that his gaze alone had the power to pierce through metal and stone. It was extremely frightening. Just looking at him would make people tremble in fear. A valiant presence revolved around the middle-aged man. It filled the entire divine hall, enveloping the 98th floor of the Beast God Hall with his powerful presence. Just his presence alone was enough to make the world tremble. The middle-aged man was Kaiser of the Beast God continent. He was the true, greatest expert of the Beast God continent. Kaiser, you finally emerged. Lankiro's voice rang out from outside the divine hall. Kaiser strode out of the divine hall. With each step, the entire divine hall would gently tremble. If it were not for the fact that the divine hall was tough enough, it probably would have been reduced to dust long ago. Lankiros, come with me to the Tianyuan continent to bring back the winged tiger. Humph. I'd like to see just who can stop me on the Tianyuan continent this time. Kaiser's voice was filled with pride, as if he did not care about anyone in the world. Kaiser, the situation has changed. Jianqin has gone to the sea realm with the winged tiger. The winged tiger is not on the Tianyuan continent right now, Lankiros said with a heavy voice. The sea realm? Kaiser frowned slightly with that. After a moment of thought, he said, Then let's go to the sea realm. Afterward, Kaiser looked at the 97th floor of the Beast God Hall. He said with a heavy and clear voice, Sangcheong, come with us to the sea realm and bring back the winged tiger. The winged tiger is the god of our magical beasts. We have no right to interfere with any of the actions of the beast god. Unless the beast god's life is threatened, I, Sangcheong, will not interfere with any of the matters of the beast god. Sangcheong's ancient voice rang out from the 97th floor. Kaiser's gaze turned slightly cold. He said nothing more. He left the beast god continent with Lankiros, 2/3 of the experts of the beast god hall, and all the experts under their 2 branches. They directly headed to the sea realm. Even though the beast god continent was extremely far away from the sea realm, distance was nothing to Kaiser and Lankiros, who were at the level of the Holy Emperor. The 2 of them directly ripped open a space gate that led to the sea realm. They crossed several tens of millions of kilometers with a single step and arrived above the sea realm. Hundreds of saint rulers, at the very least, gathered above the sea realm. The terrifying presence they gave off caused the water below to sink by 10 meters. Kaiser hovered in the air as he stared coldly at the water below. He said in a deep voice, This is a barrier that was set up by the god of the Sea Clan. After so many years, I wonder just how powerful this barrier is. Today, let me see it for myself. As soon as he finished speaking, deep light immediately shot out from King's eyes. His gaze became sharp in a single moment. Afterwards, he grabbed at the air, and the entire sky darkened with his hand. With a flip of his hand, the sky changed color. Chapter 9:12. When the greatest expert of the beast god continent personally took action, it immediately attracted the attention of all the experts on the continent, including Lankiros. Everyone stared at Kaiser's attack. The huge spear condensed from Kaiser's great strength directly ripped through space. It shot toward the sea below in an unstoppable fashion as a black spatial crack accompanied it. While the spear was still flying, its terrifying pressure had already caused the water below to rapidly expand before it had even approached the surface of the sea. It made the sea below the spear lower and lower. When the spear came in contact with the surface of the sea, the water there directly vanished, revealing a black hole that led to the bottom of the sea. At this moment, a blue pillar of energy shot out from the protective barrier around the sea, colliding with Kaiser's spear. Boom! With a heavy rumble, the surface of the sea immediately began to churn. The entire surface of the sea suddenly rose up, reaching 10,000 meters into the air from the violent shock wave. It was a magnificent sight. A blue barrier rose up from the bottom of the sea. The barrier that protected the entire sea actually expanded countless times at that moment, directly rising to the surface of the sea. The water in the surroundings was pushed aside by the barrier, causing the calm surface of the sea to immediately surge. It formed a huge tsunami that was several hundred meters tall, expanding in all directions. People of the beast god continent, you can leave. The world of the sea race is not something you can invade. A gentle voice rang out from behind. A soft voice came from the front. Inside the huge barrier that had floated out of the sea, a blurry figure could be vaguely seen. The figure was tall and exquisite. It was the shadow of a woman. Who are you? Kaiser's eyes shone with a shocking light as he stared at the figure that seemed to have completely fused with the barrier. He spoke with a deep voice and was stern. Lankiros also suddenly became stern. As a holy emperor, he could actually sense a tremendous pressure from the figure. The pressure was so great that it shocked him. This was because he had never felt such pressure even before Kaiser. Who am I? I think you already know the answer in your heart. I don't want to make things difficult for you. You can leave. My oceanic race will not allow anyone to invade. The gentle voice sounded again. The woman who had fused with the barrier took a step forward. She actually walked out of the barrier and condensed into an illusory figure in midair. It was hazy and unclear. "Are you Poseidon? You're still alive?" The king's expression turned gloomy. The fact that the sea god was still alive was a huge blow to his mind, causing him to be greatly shaken. "Yes, I am indeed not dead," Poseidon said softly. King stared closely at Poseidon's illusionary figure, and his eyes immediately lit up as if he had thought of something. He sneered, "Poseidon, since you're not dead, why haven't you come with your true body? Why have you only come with a strand of your soul? Is that all you have left?" "My soul is here. It's enough to stop you," Poseidon said calmly. He did not show any emotion at all. "That's impossible. Even if you've surpassed Saint, it's impossible for you to have lived for so long. Poseidon, if I've guessed correctly, you've actually died long ago. I just don't know why your soul hasn't been destroyed yet. Am I right? However, you're no threat to us in your current state," King sneered. His fear gradually vanished. "I spent 100 years setting up the barrier around the oceanic race. I can use the barrier's power as I please. Even if I'm only a strand of my soul, you're nowhere near my opponent," Poseidon said. "Really?" King sneered. "I'd like to see if the barrier you set up back then can block the combined attacks of me and Wukenli's." An enormous aura radiated from King's body, causing the energy of the world to become violent. Vast amounts of energy of the world began to converge towards King at a rapid pace. At the same time, Lankiros also unleashed a surging presence. His hands immediately began to swell, bursting through his clothes and turning into a pair of tiger claws covered in golden fur. Invisible world force coiled around the tiger claws. "Do it!" King called out. He launched a powerful attack with Wukenli's at the same time, directly attacking Poseidon. The space up ahead immediately darkened. It had already been shattered by the combined attacks of the two Holy Emperor experts. The space began to collapse. The attacks from the two Holy Emperor experts directly passed through Poseidon and heavily struck the barrier behind him. With a violent boom, the barrier only rippled slightly. It did not even shake, easily enduring the combined attacks of the two Holy Emperor experts. Violent ripples of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings, forcing the over 1,000 Class 7 and 8 magical beasts of the Beast God continent to retreat. "It's useless unless you break through to the origin realm. It's impossible for you to break through the barrier I've cast down. Even if the 3 great experts of your continent work together, it's nowhere near enough." Poseidon's emotionless voice rang out in the ears of King and Wukenli's. King and Wukenli's faces became extremely sunken. After a moment of thought, Wukenli said, "Poseidon, our beast god continent has no intentions of invading the sea realm. Our great winged tiger is currently in the sea realm. We only want to enter the sea realm and take the winged tiger back. The rules of the sea realm remain the same. Only magical beasts below Class 8 can enter. Magical beasts above Class 8 are forbidden from entering no matter who they are," Poseidon said. "All right, then we'll send magical beasts at the peak of Class 7 into the sea realm. When the time comes, I hope Poseidon can open a door for us and assist us in finding the beast god. Our beast god continent will definitely reward you handsomely," Wukenli said emotionlessly. "What does the beast god of your continent have to do with me? Once your people enter the sea realm, their fates will be decided by the heavens." "I won't help you," Poseidon said. Both King and Wukenli's faces became ugly when they heard that. "Also, the person you're looking for is not simple. Unless a Class 8 magical beast personally takes action, they won't be his opponent at all. It's up to you whether you want to send experts into the sea realm or not." With that, Poseidon directly turned around and returned to the barrier, fusing with it again. King clenched his fists tightly as he stared at Poseidon's back coldly. He growled, There will be a day when I break through to sainthood and reach the legendary origin realm. At that time, I will definitely break through your barrier. Let's go." With that, King returned with the experts from the beast god continent. Poseidon's gentle voice rang out in the surroundings after the people from the beast god continent had left. His voice was filled with reminiscence and regret. How can sainthood be broken through so easily? In ancient times, there were many people who reached the peak of sainthood, but there were only a handful of people who could truly break through to the origin realm. Not to mention, it's impossible to break through to sainthood now unless the world returns to how it was in ancient times. In the extremely distant north of the Tianyuan continent, there was a snow-white world. Mountains of ice that were completely condensed from translucent ice could be seen, radiating with a frigid presence. The snow there never melted. It had already existed for countless years. The coldness there was not something ordinary people could endure. Even an Earth Saint Master would not be able to survive for too long here. The cold wind howled in the sky, producing a sound that sounded like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves. Clouds of white gas visible to the naked eye fluttered in the cold wind. The white gas was extremely cold. It was so cold that it was enough to render people speechless. Even Heaven Saint Masters would be frozen into ice sculptures immediately if they came in contact with it. They would never be able to break free. Only saint rulers and hermits could resist it. This was the Arctic, a place where very few people had set foot in. A huge divine hall stood silently in the depths of the Arctic. The divine hall was extremely large, spanning over 10,000 meters. It lay on the ground silently like a slumbering primordial beast, radiating with a tremendous presence. At this moment, in the huge divine hall, a woman shrouded in extreme coldness had her eyes closed. She lay on a bed of ice that was completely carved from 10,000-year-old profound ice. The woman was completely snow-white. Not only were her clothes white, but even her hair and eyelashes were snow-white as well. She was Changyang Mingyue, the holy maiden of the Arctic ice goddess Hall. The coldness was slowly absorbed by the woman. After absorbing the coldness, Changyang Mingyue's presence clearly became much stronger. Even the coldness around her became denser. Changyang Mingyue's eyelashes gently trembled. She finally opened her eyes slowly. She sat up on the bed of ice and allowed the coldness to wash over her thin body. "Protector Shui," Changyang Mingyue gently said to the empty room. "Greetings to your highness." A cold voice rang out. An icy cold voice sounded out of nowhere. Immediately, a person whose entire body was covered in a set of snow-white armor suddenly appeared in the room. The person who had come knelt on one knee, and his tone was filled with respect. She was tall and slender. Although it was impossible to see her face under the helmet, it was not difficult to tell that she was a woman. "Protector Shui, when can I leave this place? I really want to go back and see my family." Changyang Mingyue seemed pitiful. She was filled with worry. "Your Highness, your profound ice body has not completely awakened, so you cannot leave the divine hall right now." "Protector," Shui said coldly. "Protector," Shui said in a cold voice. There was no trace of emotion in her voice. Her eyes were as cold as ice, as if she was a cold-blooded animal that did not understand emotions. "Then how long will it take for my profound ice body to completely awaken?" Changyang Mingyue asked. "I do not know. It all depends on your highness." "Protector," Shui replied. "My brother is currently being hunted down by the protector clans of the Tianyuan continent and the beast god continent. His life is in danger at all times, and something has happened to my father. I don't care. I want to leave immediately and return to Lore City." Changyang Mingyue was filled with worry as she immediately made her way outside. "Protector," Shui appeared before Changyang Mingyue out of nowhere and blocked her path. She said, "Your Highness, you cannot leave the divine hall right now." "Protector Shui, since I'm your saintess, you need to listen to my orders. I order you to move immediately. I want to return immediately. A sliver of anger appeared on Changyang Mingyue's face. I can't do that, Protector Shui said before slowly backing out. Changyang Mingyue immediately made her way outside, but when she arrived at the entrance, an invisible force had sealed it off, preventing her from leaving. Protector Shui, are you trying to imprison me? Changyang Mingyue furiously said. Her voice was filled with worry. Protector Shui stood outside and stared at Changyang Mingyue. She said, Your Highness, before your profound ice body completely awakens, I can't let you leave the Divine Hall. Protector Shui, I'm begging you. Please let me out. I really want to go home. I really do miss my mother and my brother whose fate is unknown. 2 streams of cold tears flowed from Changyang Mingyue's eyes as she spoke in a pleading voice. Changyang Mingyue understood that Protector Shui possessed the greatest status in the Ice Goddess Hall. She was like a supreme god in the Ice Goddess Hall. Protector Shui stared at Changyang Mingyue in a daze. She could feel Changyang Mingyue's heartache. Your Highness, you've changed. I remember that you weren't like this in the past. You never shed tears for mortals in the past. Protector Shui looked at Changyang Mingyue with mixed feelings. She gently sighed and said, Your Highness, I've been waiting here for over 3 million years under orders. You can't make any mistakes at this crucial moment. Before your profound ice body completely awakens, I can't let you leave. Even if you blame me in the future, I won't care. Don't worry about your family. They're all fine. Your brother is extremely safe right now as well. He's already hidden in the sea realm. With Poseidon secretly assisting him, he won't encounter any danger. Your father will be saved by your brother's Radiant Saint technique soon as well. Really? Protector Shui, is what you said true? You can sense the current situation of my family and my brother? Changyang Mingyue stared at Protector Shui in interest. Chapter 913. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed since the opening of the Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands. Jianshan, Newbies, and Xiaowang left the Turtle Clan at the same time and hurried to the Poseidon Hall to report. Jianshan was still a guest of the Poseidon Hall, so he had his own place to cultivate. At this moment, Jianshan, Xiaowang, and Newbies were chatting in the hall. They were discussing what to do after they entered the Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands. Newbies had left the artifact space half a year ago. When he was hunted down by the experts of the Serpent God Hall and Heaven Spirit Hall, he had burned his essence in order to escape at a speed faster than his own, causing him to be extremely exhausted. He had spent half a year in the artifact space, absorbing the essence of the old snake to make up for what he had lost. At the same time, his strength had reached the peak of Saint Ruler once again. He was half a step away from becoming a holy emperor. MOG of the Thousand Hand Clan has come to visit the ruler of the Turtle Clan. At this moment, a shaky voice rang out from outside, clearly reaching the ears of Jianshan, Xiaowang, and Xiaowang. With a thought, Jianshan dispersed the barrier around the hall and said, Come in. Jianshan had an extremely deep impression of the Thousand Hand Clan. The Thousand Hand Clan was a peak clan in the Sea Realm. They were much more powerful than the Taihong clan, possessing a 16th-star expert and 2 15th-star experts. They were a great clan within the territory of the Poseidon Hall. The Thousand Hand Clan was similar to the centipedes on land. They were very long and possessed 1,000 legs. They were skilled in using poison to harm others and possessed tenacious vitality. Even if their bodies were torn to pieces, they could reconstruct their bodies in a very short amount of time as long as their souls remained. It was extremely wondrous. The Thousand Hand Clan happened to be the clan that had bought a spot to enter the Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands from him. A black-robed old man walked in from outside. The old man was skinny, and his entire face was covered in a dense layer of hair. He seemed like a monkey, and a cold light would flash through his deep eyes from time to time. They were filled with coldness and brutality. MOG greets the ruler of the Turtle Clan. The old man clasped his hands at Jianqin. Although he spoke politely, he did not show any respect at all. "Warrior MOG, please take a seat. May I ask why you've suddenly come looking for us?" Jianqin smiled faintly as he spoke calmly. MOG sat down beside Jianqin and smiled. "Ruler, we'll be entering the Divine Hall of the Eight Wastelands soon. Every step in the Divine Hall is filled with danger. Aside from guarding against the attacks of other people who enter the Divine Hall, we also need to pay attention to the various killing formations in the Divine Hall. The slightest carelessness can lead to death. I've actually come to find you because I want to travel with you. That way, my chances of survival will greatly increase. What do you think, ruler?" Jianqin frowned slightly when he heard that. After a moment of thought, he agreed to MOG's suggestion. MOG rejoiced after receiving Jianqin's agreement. He then exchanged some pleasantries with Jianqin before leaving. "Jianqin, with our strength, we can do whatever we want in there as long as we're careful. Why do you want him to join us?" Newbies asked in confusion. "It's only temporary. At the same time, we don't understand the situation in the Divine Hall at all, so we can get a rough understanding of it from MOG. Jianqin smiled as the light in his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. 3 more people came to find Jianqin after MOG's departure. The 3 of them were experts from various clans who had entered the Divine Hall. They were all at the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Rulers, possessing great talent and battle prowess. They hoped to join Jianqin's group and enter the Divine Hall with him. Jianqin did not turn down any of these people because he knew that this was only temporary. Once they were faced with great temptation, their alliance would crumble. At the same time, they did not need to be surrounded by so many people with these people's help. After all, none of the people who could enter the Divine Hall this time were weak. Although they were only at the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Rulers, there were plenty of talented people who had already comprehended Saint Tier battle skills. They were experts who could heavily injure the Holy Emperor, so Jianqin needed to deal with them carefully. Jianqin's group of 3 stayed in the Divine Hall for 3 days. 3 days later, all the people who had entered the Divine Hall gathered in a huge, empty space in the Poseidon Hall. Afterward, they left under the lead of 2 hall elders and experts from various clans. They flew toward the boundary of the 3 worlds. Jianqin glanced around and discovered that there were over 300 people with them. Other than the 80 participants, the others were all experts in charge of escorting them and a few elders from the Poseidon Hall. One of the 2 hall elders from the Poseidon Hall was Elder Hong, whom Jianqin was familiar with. The other person was a woman in a blue dress. She held a meter-long staff in her hand. Her face seemed to be obscured by a layer of mist, making it impossible to see her clearly. Although the woman's attire was very similar to Atlantis, who had saved them from the experts of the Serpent God Hall and the Heaven's Spirit Hall, Jianqin knew that the woman was definitely not Atlantis. She was someone else. After several days of flying, the people from the Poseidon Hall finally arrived at the boundary of the 3 worlds. As soon as they arrived, the experts from the Heaven's Spirit Hall and the Serpent God Hall just happened to fly over from afar as well. They actually arrived at the boundary at the same time. A year's time is up, so let's cut to the chase. Those who possess the 8 wastelands, please take out all 8 fragments at the same time and combine them, said Elder Hong of the Hall of Poseidon Hall. Immediately, the 8 people who had obtained the 8 wastelands all took out their fragments and stepped forward. They stood at the very front of the group. Out of the 8 fragments, the Poseidon Hall had obtained 4, while the Serpent God Hall and the Heaven's Spirit Hall had obtained 2 each. Jianqin held the 8 wastelands fragment as he stood with the other 3. With his sharp senses, he immediately sensed several sharp gazes on him, so he looked around. He saw 2 hall elders from the Serpent God Hall and 2 hall elders from the Heaven's Spirit Hall staring at him with sunken gazes. They were so vicious that it was as if they were tempted to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Jianqin's expression did not change, but he sneered inside. A few days ago, the 2 halls seemed to have suffered quite a bit at his hands. Both Holy Emperor-level experts had died, and 3 16-star experts had been taken away by Atlantis of the Poseidon Hall. They had been utterly humiliated. So the 8 Wastelands fragment that belonged to our Haojia has ended up in your hands. Kid, what's your name? What organization do you belong to? How did you obtain the 8 Wastelands? An old voice rang out from the direction of the heavens' spirit hall. An old man stared at Jianchen with an ugly expression. The old man knew extremely well who possessed the other 7 fragments of the 8 Wastelands. He only did not recognize Jianchen. Jianshan looked over and immediately recognized the old man as the Holy Emperor of Haojia, the person who had taken the fragment of the 8 Wastelands from Qing Yishuan. I am Jianchen, the ruler of the Turtle Clan. I obviously obtained the fragment of the 8 Wastelands from Qing Yishuan. Jianchen clasped his hands at the Holy Emperor of Haojia and smiled. If he had not used a Saint-tier battle skill to heavily injure Qing Yishuan, it would have been impossible for him to steal the fragment of the 8 Wastelands from Qing Yishuan. The Holy Emperor of Haojia could not help but ease up slightly with that. He chuckled aloud. It's rumored that the fragment of the 8 Wastelands that Qing Yishuan stole from me was stolen by 2 14-star juniors. I didn't believe it at first, but it looks like it's all true now. Humph, I really never thought that Qing Yishuan, one of the 8 great human experts, would actually fall to the hands of 2 juniors. Quite a few people in the surroundings looked at Jianchen strangely with that. There was quite a lot of admiration in their gazes as well, just as courage alone was worthy of admiration, since he dared to steal something from the renowned Qing Yishuan as a mere 14-star expert. At this moment, Elder Hong extended a finger and 4 strands of energy shot out from his hand. They directly merged with the fragment of the 8 Wastelands and vanished. Afterward, the inconspicuous fragment of the map immediately pulsed with energy, causing it to become covered in a hazy light. Everyone, please undo the seal on the fragment of the 8 Wastelands. Elder Hong looked at the people from the 2 halls. Afterwards, the hall elders of the Heaven's Spirit Hall and the Serpent God Hall acted at the same time. 2 strands of energy shot from their fingers into the fragment of the 8 Wastelands, removing the seal hidden within. The 8 fragments immediately shone with a hazy light. The light grew brighter and brighter before becoming extremely dazzling in the end. It was like a sun that illuminated the surroundings. The 8 fragments of the map slowly flew from Jianchen and the others' hands before fusing together in the air. A while later, when the light gradually vanished, a 1-meter-wide piece of beast fur hovered in the air before flying toward the territory of the Serpent God Hall with lightning speed. The 8 Wastelands Divine Hall will take us to where the 8 Wastelands Divine Halls are. Let's follow them, someone yelled out. Immediately, the people from the 3 halls crossed the border and chased after them. The 3 halls had come to an agreement before that they could enter the territory of any one of them while they searched for the 8 Wastelands. The group of people followed the 8 Wasteland map and flew into the distance. After flying for hundreds of thousands of miles, they finally stopped above a primitive mountain range. At this moment, the 8 Wastelands diagram hovered in the air. It gave off a strange presence, causing the surrounding space to tremble slightly and become blurry. So the Emperor of the 8 Wastelands hid his divine hall here. The 2 hall elders of the Serpent God Hall murmured as they looked at the sky. At this moment, an extremely powerful pulse of energy appeared in the air. The space was ripped open, forming a huge black hole. A huge divine hall slowly appeared in the black hole. The divine hall of the 8 Wastelands that had been hidden in space had finally descended upon the world of the sea realm. The divine hall of the 8 Wastelands was several hundred meters tall and several thousand meters long. It was completely golden, as if it was forged from gold. It shone with a dazzling golden light, which was quite enchanting. As the divine hall of the 8 Wastelands completely descended, the black hole above it vanished as well. Afterwards, the 8 Wastelands diagram that had fused together split into 8 pieces again, landing in the hands of Jianchen and the others. Brother Jianqin, the most precious thing in the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands is this divine hall apart from the Emperor's legacy. Once we enter the divine hall, you must find a way to enter the core of the Eight Wastelands divine hall and obtain this divine hall. Elder Hong's voice rang out in Jianqin's head as he communicated with Jianqin secretly. Jianqin nodded calmly before flying into the divine hall in the sky with the other people who had entered. Chapter 9:14. Within the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands, a total of 160 experts gathered in a spacious hall. They all stood in groups as they stared at their surroundings cautiously. They were all on guard against one another. Jianchen, Newbies, Diablo, and Mo.G gathered together. They stood in an inconspicuous corner and stared at the people around them cautiously. At the same time, they studied their surroundings from the corner of their eyes. Right now, they were standing in a very spacious hall. The hall was circular in shape, and there were 16 passageways leading in all directions. Each passageway was more than 30 meters tall, and no one knew where they led to. Mo.G, do you have a map of this place? Jianqin asked the four of them secretly. The map fragment of the Eight Wastelands was only the key to the Divine Hall. It did not contain a map of the Divine Hall. Moreover, the map fragment of the Eight Wastelands had vanished after Jianqin and the others entered. Mo.G shook his head gently. The legendary emperor of the Eight Wastelands was a loner. He had very few friends. No one has ever entered the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands that he created when he became an emperor. No one has ever entered the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands, so no map has ever been passed down. We can only try our luck for the rest of the journey. Hopefully we can find the right path, a black-robed young man said telepathically. He was an expert from a large tribe within the territory of the Poseidon Hall. His name was Deity, and he was one of the 4 people who had joined Jianqin's group. At this moment, many groups in the surroundings began to move. They each chose a path from the 16 tunnels and left. Suddenly, a heavy sound rang out from the surroundings. The sound was extremely dense, like countless raindrops hitting the ground. It came from the 16 tunnels. The sudden turn of events caused everyone to raise their vigilance to the highest level. They were all prepared for battle. Even those who were just about to leave all retreated back to the center of the hall and gathered with everyone else. A series of beastly roars came from the 16 tunnels. Then, one after another, huge beasts rushed out from the 16 tunnels. Their eyes were red as they charged at the group. There were many of them, and every single one of them was not weak. They were all Heaven Saint Masters at the very least, and many of them were Saint Rulers. These are ferocious beasts. Damn it, why are there so many ferocious beasts here, and they are so strong? The great emperor of the Eight Wastelands actually raised ferocious beasts in his own shrine. This is troublesome. These ferocious beasts are affected by the power of the shrine. Although they don't have intelligence, they're much stronger than ordinary ferocious beasts. I hope we don't encounter any ferocious beasts that are too strong. There are too many ferocious beasts. Let's work together and kill them all. The quiet divine hall of the Eight Wastelands immediately became chaotic. Many saint rulers called out sternly. Jianqin and Newbies became stern as well. Newbies' hands immediately became golden. He was ready for battle. He said with a deep voice, I can already sense the presence of a few Class 8 magical beasts. There are actually Class 8 magical beasts hidden among the ferocious beasts. The chaotic Niden in Jianqin's dantian surged with strands of chaotic force, pushing the defenses of the chaotic body to the limit. Afterward, he pulled out the king weapon from his space ring and expanded the senses of his soul as hard as he could. However, the senses of his soul were suppressed by the power of the shrine, so it could only reach several thousand meters away at most. It was unable to pass through the structures either. There are a total of 4 Class 8 magical beasts. 2 of them are at the 2nd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. The 3rd is at the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, and the last one is at the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, Jianqin said with a heavy voice. He had already clearly observed the strength of the ferocious beasts with the senses of his soul. At the same time, he also discovered that the interior of the 8 Desolation Divine Palace was extremely large. It was definitely not the size that he saw from the outside that was only 100 zhang tall and a few thousand meters long. The size of the 8 Desolation Divine Palace that he saw from the outside was not the real size. The ferocious beasts surged out of the 16 tunnels like a flood. Very soon, they came into contact with over 100 saint rulers. An intense battle immediately erupted between the two sides. Violent ripples of energy filled the entire space, but they were unable to destroy anything there. Nubis was already half a step away from becoming a holy emperor. Coupled with his original form as a beast of antiquity, his battle prowess was no weaker than regular holy emperor experts. He charged into the horde of ferocious beasts all by himself and constantly stabbed his hands into the bodies of the ferocious beasts, tearing them apart. Blood splattered through the sky and dyed the ground red. Jianqin charged into the horde of ferocious beasts with his saint weapon. His sword turned into a blur that enveloped the space before him, cutting through the bodies of the ferocious beasts one by one. Countless heads were tossed high into the air as blood dyed the sky red. Jianqin killed as he collected monster cores. In just a short while, several dozen ferocious beasts had died to Jianqin's hands. He had also collected several dozen Class 6 and 7 monster cores. The other participants all used their abilities, killing Class 6 and 7 ferocious beasts one by one. The countless corpses immediately formed a thick carpet in the hall. The number of ferocious beasts decreased, while the pile of corpses on the ground increased. However, the 160C realm experts remained unscathed. Not a single one of them had been injured. Roar! At this moment, a few deafening roars rang out. For Class 8 ferocious beasts struck out, charging into the crowd as blurs. Immediately, over a dozen saint rulers were blown away by the barbaric attacks of the 4 ferocious beasts. They all paled and were quite injured. They're 15th star ferocious beasts. "Let's go together," a group of people called out. Immediately, over 20 saint rulers charged toward a ferocious beast that was at the 2nd heavenly layer of Holy Emperor. They began to surround and attack it. At this moment, no one could remain uninvolved. These powerful ferocious beasts needed to be killed while there were many of them. Otherwise, it would be certain death if they encountered them alone. As a result, the 160 experts present were extremely united at this moment. Jianchen, Xia Huang, Mog, and the other 3 stared down a ferocious beast that was at the 3rd heavenly layer of Holy Emperor. Newbies and over 30 other experts engaged in an extremely intense battle against the ferocious beast that was at the 5th heavenly layer of Holy Emperor. Jianchen wielded a saint weapon, so his battle prowess was at the 3rd heavenly layer of Holy Emperor. He stabbed the ferocious beast's neck with lightning speed, causing it to howl in pain. The other experts immediately used their full strength to attack the ferocious beast. They all struck the ferocious beast with powerful attacks, causing it to become covered in wounds. However, the ferocious beast's defense was extraordinarily great. Their attacks only scratched the ferocious beast's skin and did not cause too much damage. Jianchen's eyes were cold as he radiated with surging sword intent. It was as if he had become a sword with a surging presence at that moment. He hovered in the air as he began to spin rapidly. The saint weapon that had stabbed into the ferocious beast's neck immediately began to spin rapidly under the influence of Jianchen's body. It rapidly spun, expanding the wound on the ferocious beast's neck like a meat grinder. In the end, Jianchen passed through the hole in the ferocious beast's neck with his sword. The ferocious beast let out a powerless cry. A foot-wide hole had been drilled into its neck, which was not very thick. Only a quarter of its flesh was connected to its head. At this moment, there was a flash of light. A 9th heavenly layer, Saint Ruler, had chopped off the beast's neck, which was only a quarter of its flesh, with a huge blade. The entire beast's head was lopped off, and it flew high into the air as blood splattered everywhere. Immediately, over a dozen powerful beams of energy shot out from the hands of the saint rulers, directly entering the ferocious beast's head through the wound. With a boom, it exploded from within, blasting the ferocious beast's head to pieces. Only a blood-soaked monster core fell from the air. Immediately, several saint rulers wanted to steal the Class 8 monster core, but a figure arrived before the monster core even faster than them. He directly grabbed the monster core. It was Genshin. A cold light flashed through the eyes of the saint rulers. When they saw that the person who had taken the monster core was Genshin, they immediately fell silent. The ruler of the Turtle Clan had dared to steal something from Qing Yishuan and had even succeeded. Whether it was his courage or strength, he was incomparable to an ordinary person. None of them wanted to offend Genshin over a mere Class 8 monster core. A ferocious beast at the third heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor had died to the hands of a group of saint rulers just like that. However, the person who benefited the most was Genshin. He had obtained an extremely rare Class 8 monster core on the Tianyuan continent. After Genshin killed the ferocious beast, the other 3 Holy Emperor-level ferocious beasts continued to battle with everyone. The 2 beasts at the second heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor were already covered in blood. Countless wounds crisscrossed across their bodies. They could not last for much longer. The final ferocious beast at the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor was still extremely valiant. Its wounds were extremely few, so the normal attacks of the saint rulers struggled to break through its defenses. Only newbies had the ability to leave behind relatively deep wounds. Bang, bang, bang. With a series of heavy sounds, several saint rulers were knocked away by the ferocious beast at the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. They all vomited blood and were extremely heavily injured. They only managed to crawl back to their feet after quite a while. They immediately pulled out medicine from their space rings and began to heal. They did not continue fighting. Bang! Another heavy sound rang out. Newbies had been kicked away by the ferocious beast. His face immediately became rather pale. Genshin used the illusory flash and shot toward newbies with lightning-like speed, leaving behind an afterimage. He caught newbies in the air and asked in concern, "Are you fine?" Several of the bones in newbies' chest had been broken, so his wounds were not light. He endured the pain and stood up. He said, "That ferocious beast is far too powerful. Not only is it tough, making it very difficult to deal with, but it's also extremely strong. Genshin, do you have any more radiant spirit pills on you? Give me a few more." Without any hesitation, Genshin pulled out a small wooden box from his space ring and passed it to newbies. He said, "I don't need these things, so keep them on you. If I'm not by your side, use these radiant spirit pills to heal." Newbies did not hold back and directly stored the box in his space ring. Chapter 9:15. At this moment, the 2 feral beasts that were at the second heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor were covered in blood. They were on the brink of death, and their attacks became weaker and weaker. "Keep going. It can't last much longer. It's about to die," a saint king yelled out. A saint ruler yelled out. At the same time, he threw a punch at the beast's head, causing it to shake violently. A few cracks appeared on its skull. At this moment, there was a flash. Genshin had arrived on the back of the feral beast with the illusory flash. The saint weapon in his hand gave off a destructive presence as he suddenly swung down, cutting through the terrifying wound on the feral beast's neck. Kacha! The entire head of the feral beast was chopped off by Genshin. Blood immediately spurted out from its body, giving off a dazzling smell of blood. Genshin swung his arm and the saint weapon stabbed out once more. It stabbed deeply into the head of the feral beast and removed a monster core that was covered in blood. He did not even have the time to wipe the blood off before stowing it away in his space ring. Without pausing at all, he immediately charged toward the next feral beast. A few seconds later, The life of the next feral beast was ended by Genshin. Its monster core also ended up in Genshin's hands, which made Genshin slightly excited. In just a short while, he had obtained 3 Class 8 monster cores. This was something unimaginable on the Tianyuan continent. Hurry up and deal with this feral beast. It's already at the 16th star. We need to kill it here, or once we split up, no one will be able to do anything to it. It'll bring us disaster. A saint ruler called for help as he fought against the last feral beast. The feral beast was at the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. Even though it was surrounded by over 30 saint rulers, it was still extremely ferocious, forcing the saint rulers to retreat all by itself. Immediately, over 100 saint rulers charged over and engaged in a great battle with the last vicious beast. Genshin did not stand by idly either. He joined in the killing of the last vicious beast with the saint weapon in hand. The feral beast was extremely powerful. They needed to kill it completely while there were more people. Otherwise, once they split up, all of them might die to the feral beast's claws. Under the combined attacks of over 109th heavenly layer saint rulers, the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor finally produced an unwilling and sorrowful cry. It collapsed in a puddle of blood. Over 30 of the saint rulers that had surrounded it had already become heavily injured. The monster core in the head of the feral beast had become the most sought-after item. Over 20 saint rulers immediately charged toward the head. As they fought over it, they directly shattered the huge head. The monster core hidden in the head flew into the air from the great impact. The saint rulers shot into the sky at the same time and flew toward the monster core. They moved extremely quickly. A gleam of light exploded in Genshin's eyes. 2 streaks of light, one violet and one azure, vaguely appeared in his eyes. He extended his hand and grabbed at the air. The monster core that the saint rulers were fighting over immediately changed directions and flew toward him. In the end, it landed in Genshin's hand. Over 10 of the saint rulers immediately gave up when they saw that the person who had taken the monster core was Genshin. However, 7 of them still charged toward Genshin with killing intent. They wanted to steal the Class 8 monster core from him. Genshin's gaze sharpened at that moment. He gripped the Class 8 monster core tightly in his left hand as he stabbed out with the saint weapon in his right hand. He actually stabbed out 7 times in a single moment. Ding, 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 ding. With the sound of metal clashing, the weapons of the 7 ninth heavenly layer saint rulers all collided with the saint weapon in Genshin's hand. The 2 sides retreated as soon as they clashed. The 7 saint rulers all staggered back as their faces changed drastically. They then looked at Genshin with deep fear and disbelief. Genshin seemed to be rooted to the ground. He stood there firmly without moving at all. He had repelled the 7 saint rulers all by himself. He seemed to be extremely relaxed. The people in the surroundings immediately fell into an uproar when they saw this. At that moment, everyone looked at Genshin with deep fear. It would be extremely unfortunate if they offended such a powerful enemy in the divine hall of the 8 wastelands that was cut off from the outside world. Genshin coldly stared at the 7 saint rulers. He could not help but sneer. I'd like to see just how long you can last. Spurt, spurt, spurt. As soon as Genshin finished speaking, the 7 saint rulers all vomited blood. They immediately became haggard. They had been injured by the sword chi the moment they clashed. After all, Genshin wielded a saint weapon, so he could unleash strength equivalent to the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. Even a casual strike from a 3rd heavenly layer Holy Emperor was not something saint rulers could endure. The eyes of all the people in the surroundings widened as they stared at this scene in shock. They could not be any more shocked. Ha ha ha, the ruler of the Turtle Clan really is extraordinary. I've finally witnessed it today. Mo.G walked out from the crowd as he laughed aloud. He directly arrived beside Genshin as he praised him. Afterward, the 3 other people from Genshin's group all arrived before Genshin as well. as if they wanted to prove to everyone that they were with the ruler of the Turtle Clan. Jianchen looked at the Class 8 monster core in his hand and said to the 7 people, "Do you still want to compete with me for this monster core now?" "Turtle King, we are extremely sorry. We didn't know that you had obtained the monster core before. Please forgive us if we have offended you in any way." An old man apologized to Jianchen in a submissive manner. He was filled with sincerity. Jianchen slightly frowned when he heard that. A sliver of displeasure appeared on his face as he said, "I don't like people calling me the Turtle King. My name is Jianchen." "Yes, Turtle King." The old man did not dare to disobey, so he politely replied. Although he was at the same level of cultivation as Jianchen, he was the ruler of a clan. He would become someone like a hall elder sooner or later, or even an emperor, let alone the old man. Even their tribe did not dare to offend him so easily. However, the old man did not seem to notice his slip of the tongue. He actually called Jianchen the Turtle King again. Jianchen gently sighed inside. He could not be bothered to argue with the old man over such a small matter. He stowed the Class 8 monster core away in his space ring before arriving before newbies. He stood guard over the healing newbies. With all the beasts slain, the tacit understanding between everyone was broken. They all spread out cautiously, keeping an eye on the people there. Everyone understood that there were only so many treasures in the divine hall of the 8 wastelands. The fewer people there were, the greater the chances of obtaining the treasures. As a result, a battle could erupt at any time. Basically, everyone there was eager for everyone to die apart from themselves. That way, they could obtain the legacy of the 8 wastelands without any worries, as well as the various treasures in the Divine Hall. A while later, the people gathered in various places, left through the various tunnels in groups. As a result, there were fewer and fewer people in the hall. In less than half an hour, everyone had left, leaving only Jianchen's group of 7 behind. They all smelled the thick stench of blood in the air. "Jianchen, let's go as well." Newbie stood up from the ground. His wounds had mostly recovered from the Class 6 Radiant Spirit pill. Although he had not fully recovered, it did not affect him too much. Jianchen looked at the 16 tunnels and chose one at random. Moji and the other 3 followed closely behind Jianchen's group. The Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands was like a maze. The tunnels extended in all directions and were basically everywhere. When Jianchen's group reached the end of the tunnel, they actually came across several forks that led to unknown places. The forks were like tree branches with many smaller branches growing out from the branches, and even more branches growing out from the smaller branches. There were so many of them that it was very easy to get lost. At this moment, a loud beast roar rang out from ahead. A 3-meter-tall Class 7 vicious beast appeared in front of Jianchen's group. It stared at Jianchen's group with its scarlet eyes before charging towards them. Jianchen's eyes immediately lit up when he saw the Class 7 vicious beast. It was as if the vicious beast was not a powerful opponent in his eyes, but an extremely precious Class 7 monster core. "Leave it to me." Just as Moji was about to kill the vicious beast, Jianchen had already charged over with the Emperor weapon. He beheaded the Class 7 vicious beast with a single strike and took away its monster core. After taking the monster core, Jianchen's group ignored the corpse of the vicious beast and continued forward. Jianchen's group shuttled through the maze aimlessly. Along the way, they would encounter vicious beasts one after another. However, these vicious beasts were all Class 7, and there were even Class 6 beasts. Not only did they not pose any threat to Jianchen's group, they even allowed Jianchen to harvest a lot of monster cores. Just as they passed through a passage, the scene before them suddenly opened up. They saw that they had already arrived at a very spacious hall. Jianchen's gaze swept the surroundings, and his face immediately became gloomy. He had already recognized that this hall was the same hall they had entered from when they first entered the 8 Wasteland Shrine. They had taken a big detour here, and actually came back. However, the piles of vicious beast corpses in the hall had already disappeared. Gentian's group was not the first to return. At this moment, there were already over 40 people scattered around the hall. They were discussing and occasionally drawing on the ground, analyzing the path of the maze. Crap, we're actually back here. Newbies' face was also very ugly. Chapter 9:16. Jianqin slowly made his way to the center of the hall as he stared at the ground. The formation on the ground was around 20 meters in diameter. It was a pentagram, and countless tiny, blood-red threads were connected to each other. They were arranged in an extremely complicated and profound manner. Jianqin stared at the formation on the ground as he sank into his thoughts. He clearly remembered that when he first arrived in the hall, there was no such complicated formation on the ground. Is this not the hall I just came from, but another hall that's exactly the same? Jianqin could not help but wonder, but he rejected this thought very soon. He was extremely certain that this hall was the one he had just left from. There's actually a formation here. A saint ruler also discovered the formation on the ground and immediately cried out in surprise. The other saint rulers in the hall were all drawn over as well. They gathered from various places and stared at the formation on the ground as they pondered. There are many red threads in the formation. Is it a map of the maze? A saint ruler guessed. Impossible. The red threads don't resemble the maze at all. It's impossible for it to be a map of the maze. Someone immediately rejected that person's suggestion. This formation didn't exist before, yet it suddenly appeared now. Is it related to us making it out of the maze? Another person voiced his opinion. Everyone fell silent. Many of them had thought of the same thing, but they were unable to verify it. At this moment, a great beast's roar rang out from a tunnel. A vicious beast had already been slain by an expert of the sea race. It let out a miserable cry before it died. A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. He had already enveloped the entire formation with the senses of his soul, so no changes could escape his senses. When the vicious beast died earlier, he discovered that another red thread had appeared in the formation. Is the formation's appearance related to those vicious beasts? A thought flashed through Jianqin's head. We appeared here when we entered the divine hall of the 8 wastelands. At that time there was no formation on the ground, so we were attacked by a large group of vicious beasts. After the vicious beasts died, their corpses covered the ground, preventing us from seeing what was on the ground. When I returned, the corpses had disappeared and a formation had appeared on the ground. Is the formation because of those vicious beasts? A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes as he rapidly analyzed the situation. Suddenly, Jianqin's expression changed. He said in a low voice, I know. This formation should be the key to getting out of the maze. It's just that, for some reason, the formation has been hidden. It only appears with the blood of the vicious beasts. Every time a vicious beast dies, a part of the formation will appear. When the number of vicious beasts reaches a certain number, the formation will completely appear. When that happens, we'll be able to get out of the maze. Hearing this, everyone in the field was startled. Immediately, they stared at the array on the ground without blinking. As they looked, they began to ponder. Do you have any evidence to prove that your theory is correct? A burly middle-aged man asked Jianqin. Look at the formation carefully. If I've guessed correctly, a red thread will appear once the vicious beasts die. The red thread should be a part of the formation. Only when it completely appears will the formation become complete, said Jianqin. After that, no one spoke. They all gathered around the array diagram and stared intently at the changes in the array diagram. Afterward, quite a few saint rulers returned from the maze, causing more and more people to gather in the hall. As soon as they arrived in the main hall, they immediately noticed the people standing in a circle around the array diagram. They immediately joined them with curiosity and stared at the array diagram with doubts. At this moment, another sorrowful roar rang out. Another vicious beast had been killed in the maze. As soon as the ferocious beast died, an old man among the people watching the formation immediately exclaimed, "Look, there is indeed an extra red thread." I can see it too. It really is like that. These vicious beasts really are the key to leaving. The formation needs their blood to be drawn. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go kill those vicious beasts so that the formation can be completed sooner. Everyone cried out. Immediately, there were people who entered the tunnels eagerly and began to hunt the vicious beasts. Jianchen and the others did not hesitate either. They randomly chose a tunnel and left, joining the hunt. He needed the monster cores of the vicious beasts very much. Any single one of them would be priceless treasures on the Tianyuan continent. He needed to use this rare opportunity to collect as many as he could. The vicious beasts in the divine hall of the 8 wastelands had all been raised by the emperor of the 8 wastelands. After so many years of breeding, no one knew just how many of them there were. No one even knew what level of cultivation the strongest had reached. Jianchen and the others blindly moved through the tunnels, specifically searching for vicious beasts. They would come across other saint rulers from time to time. But when they saw that it was the ruler of the turtle clan, Jianchen, they immediately showed deep fear. After greeting Jianchen warmly, they chose a path to follow. No one dared to offend them. After all, they had all witnessed Jianchen's strength when he had killed the 5th heavenly layer vicious beast from the Holy Emperor. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. During those 3 days, Jianchen constantly moved through the labyrinth with the people behind him, specifically searching for vicious beasts to kill. After 3 days of slaughter, countless vicious beasts had died to Jianchen's hands, allowing Jianchen to collect a large number of monster cores. Rumble! Just when Jianchen killed the vicious beast in his hands, the entire labyrinth suddenly began to violently shake. The incomplete formation in the hall with the complicated formation had already been completely revealed. It shone with a dazzling red light that illuminated the entire hall. The entire hall was filled with extremely powerful energy at that moment. The next moment, the walls of the labyrinth slowly sank into the ground. Very soon, they had completely sunk into the ground. As the walls vanished, the experts scattered across the labyrinth were all exposed. The labyrinth is gone. The formation really is the way out of the labyrinth. The experts immediately cried out happily when they saw everything in the surroundings. Jianchen removed the monster core from the vicious beast's head before looking around. He discovered that he was actually in a huge square. The square was extremely large, spanning over 10 kilometers in diameter. The labyrinth from before had been constructed on the square. The 8 Wastelands Divine Hall is basically a world of its own. It's actually so large. Just the size of the square has completely exceeded the size of the Divine Hall that we saw from the outside. Newbie sighed emotionally as he looked around. The hall we just entered should be the entrance to the Divine Hall. This square should be the front part of the Divine Hall. Let's continue down, Jianchen said before making his way into the Divine Hall first. At the same time, the other saint rulers set off as well. They maintained a certain distance from each other as they made their way into the depths of the Divine Hall at a steady pace. All of them were vigilant. Not only did they have to be wary of the people around them, but they also had to be wary of the dangers of the Divine Hall itself. At this moment, Jianchen's eyes narrowed. He suddenly looked to the side and saw that the space 100 meters away had begun to pulse violently. It enveloped the 5 saint rulers who were walking together, causing them to disappear. Everyone be careful. There's a formation here. Someone immediately cried out in the surroundings. Everyone immediately raised their vigilance. No one cared about the fates of the people trapped in the formation. They carefully made their way into the depths of the Divine Hall again. The formations hidden in the Divine Hall were difficult to detect. Afterward, the formations hidden in various places appeared one after another, trapping the saint rulers who had triggered them. Even Jianchen and the others were trapped 3 times by powerful killing formations, but they were all broken through by the 7 of them working together. They passed through the front of the Divine Hall safely and arrived in the center. There were many majestic halls and pavilions in the center of the divine hall. There were also well-preserved gardens and ponds. Flowers bloomed in the gardens, giving off a heavy fragrance. Many unknown insects moved about in the gardens, while many fish swam about in the ponds. The fragrance of the water permeated the air. Due to the influence of the temple's power, whether it was the various insects living in the garden or the fish in the pond, they all evolved and became extraordinary creatures with extremely strong offensive abilities. No one knew how long they had lived there. Some of them even radiated with presences that rivaled saint rulers. The power they used was extremely strange, similar to the power of the divine hall. It was extremely powerful. Everyone knew how powerful these creatures were, so no one was willing to provoke them. They avoided them from afar and continued on their way. The central area of the temple was like a city with well-connected roads. When everyone arrived here, they gradually spread out in all directions. Boom! Suddenly, a violent boom rang out in the distance. A saint ruler attempted to enter a hall, but as soon as he opened the door, he was blown away by the violent ripples of energy that surged out from inside. Blood sprayed from his mouth uncontrollably while he was still in the air. However, the door to the hall was not closed. Instead, it was wide open. "Let's go in and take a look," said a voice. Immediately, 3 saint rulers carefully made their way into the hall. At the same time, blue armor completely condensed from energy appeared on their bodies. An undetectable gleam of light flashed through Genshin's eyes as he stared at their armor. This was not the first time he had clashed with the Holy Emperor. He could clearly sense the vast presence of the Holy Emperor from their armor. This isn't their power. They have the Holy Emperor's power within them. They're using the Holy Emperor's power to condense this armor. Genshin understood very quickly. The Holy Emperor's power would clearly only be used when they faced true danger. Now that they had entered a hall of unknown danger, the danger would definitely be much greater than the beasts, which was why they used the Holy Emperor's power without any hesitation. Many people outside paid attention to their actions. The light in the eyes of many of them began to flicker. They were all hesitating on whether they should take the risk and enter the hall to investigate. Boom! Chapter 9:17. At this moment, a violent rumble rang out from the hall. A powerful shockwave of energy immediately radiated from the hall, causing the space there to tremble. The hearts of everyone outside sank. They had already predicted that the people who had entered the hall were probably dead. There really was great danger hidden within the halls. It was not as peaceful as it seemed on the surface. The rumbling sounds in the hall rang out several times in succession. Soon, it returned to silence, and not the slightest bit of movement was heard. Due to the Emperor's power within the halls, no one was able to peer inside. Even the senses of Genshin's soul were unable to enter. Looks like those people have already died here, many people thought. As a result, they became more and more fearful of the halls. They swore that they would never barge in. However, before long, a series of footsteps rang out from the hall. The 3 experts who had entered the hall actually walked out alive. All of them were filled with unconcealable joy. Clearly, they had gained a lot. Their armor had dimmed, having absorbed the violent attack for them. Its energy had been greatly depleted. Their appearance immediately attracted the gazes of everyone present. Everyone stared at the 3 of them in shock. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. "You're actually still alive. What's in there?" Many people immediately began to ask, but they did not receive any response. After the 3 of them emerged from the hall, they immediately hurried to the next hall without any hesitation. "There must be good stuff in these halls. Let's go look for it." "Don't let them get there first," someone called out. Someone immediately cried out. Immediately, the experts who had been extremely fearful of the palaces no longer had any misgivings. They began to charge towards the surrounding palaces in groups of 3 to 5. "Let's go have a look as well." Genshin waved his hand and led the people behind him to a nearby hall. Violent rumbles constantly rang out from various places. A few experts in the surroundings had already opened the doors of the halls in armor condensed from the Holy Emperor's power. Many of them were blown far away by the powerful energy that erupted from the halls. Jian Chen witnessed everything in the surroundings. He had already realized that apart from him, newbies, and Diablo, all the experts who had entered the 8 wastelands this time probably possessed the Holy Emperor's power left behind by the Holy Emperor. The purpose of this was to increase their chances of survival. Once someone obtained a treasure and brought it out, the clan behind them would benefit. Looks like MOG and the other 3 possess the Holy Emperor's power as well. I wonder just how powerful the Holy Emperor's power is. I need to be careful. Jianqin glanced at MOG and the other 3 from the corner of his eye and secretly raised his guard. Jianqin's group of 7 stopped before the doors of a hall. After a moment of silence, Diablo's voice rang out from the side. Once this door is opened, it'll be subjected to a powerful attack. Any one of us will be injured. Why don't the 7 of us open it together? That's fine too. Let the 7 of us open the door together, an old man said calmly. He was called Gouda, one of the 4 people who had joined Jianqin's group. Afterwards, the 7 of them pushed open the door together. As soon as the door was pushed open, a powerful shockwave of energy rushed towards the 7 of them. The 7 of them struck out at the same time, each sending out a powerful attack that collided with the shockwave of energy. With a great rumble, the 7 of them were forced back by the shockwave of energy. They only stabilized themselves after taking over a dozen steps back. Fortunately, they were not injured at all. Jianqin's group immediately entered the hall. They saw that the interior of the hall was decorated with gold and jade. Although it had been sealed for many years, it was still extremely clean and spotless. Jianchen glanced around and soon fixed his gaze on the table in the living room. There was a space ring, a scroll, a thin book, and a foot-long stone slab on the table. The 7 of them made their way to the living room instinctively. Suddenly, the surrounding space pulsed violently, and the scenery before them vanished in a single moment. It was replaced by a roaring sea of fire, radiating with terrifying heat. It's so hot. It's a formation. We've been trapped in a formation again, Diablo said with a heavy voice. The evil king said in a deep voice. Immediately, a powerful force gushed out from his body, forming a protective shield around his body to resist the burning sea of fire. Jianqin stared at the sea of fire calmly. He sensed the terrifying heat and said nonchalantly, "This formation is much more powerful than any formation we've seen before. If I've guessed correctly, this formation was prepared for 15th Star Warriors. I really don't like the temperature here. Let's work together and break through this formation immediately." Mo Ji frowned and said impatiently, "To the sea race that lived in the sea, fire was their nemesis. There was no one among them who did not hate fire." Jianqin pulled out his saint armament and leapt into the air. He viciously swung his sword at the space above him with a destructive presence. The strike was as powerful as a casual strike from the Holy Emperor. It had completely surpassed the strength of a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler. As the sword tore through the air, it immediately caused the formation space to violently tremble before loudly shattering. The sea of fire vanished, and the surroundings returned to normal. Jianqin had destroyed the formation with just a single strike. MOG and the others immediately became shocked when they saw this. To their knowledge, the Turtle Clan was a clan with powerful defenses and weak attacks, but the battle prowess displayed by the ruler of the Turtle Clan before them was completely different from what the legend said. The ruler's strength has truly broadened our horizons. You've actually destroyed the formation that was specially made to deal with 15-star experts all by yourself. A person who followed Jianqin complimented him with a charming smile. Jianqin said indifferently, "This formation may have been used to deal with 15-star experts, but it's not as powerful as it used to be after such a long time. Otherwise, I would never have been able to destroy it so easily. Let's go see what treasures there are in this hall." With that, Jianqin entered the guest room with the saint armament. He glanced past the items on the table one by one before fixing his gaze on the foot-long stone slab in the end. Jianqin extended his hand toward the stone slab. It was heavy in his hand. The stone slab was only a foot long, but its weight was completely disproportionate to its size. It weighed several hundred kilograms at the very least, so it would be extremely difficult for weaker people to pick it up. Jianqin picked up the stone slab and studied it effortlessly. There were some inscriptions on the stone slab, but they were incomplete. It was impossible to tell what they were. However, Jianqin could sense a pressure that seemed to originate from the world from the stone slab. It was filled with surging battle intent. Jianqin carefully sensed the pressure from the stone slab. He felt like the pressure was familiar to him, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Jianqin's head. He said with a deep voice, "This is an incomplete diagram of a Tian-level saint technique." Tian-level saint techniques were what the people of the Sea Realm called battle skills. They were divided into 4 ranks, which were Heaven, Earth, Profound, and Yellow. Tian-level saint techniques were saint-tier battle skills on the Tian-Yuan continent. The other people all stared at the stone slab in Jianqin's hand with burning interest, but they became disappointed very soon. Xia Wang said regretfully, "It's a pity that it's only an incomplete diagram. It's useless even if we have it. Tian-level saint techniques are extremely difficult to comprehend even if they're complete. Many 16th star experts can't grasp them, let alone this incomplete diagram. If we don't collect all of them, this incomplete map will be a useless map," MOG said regretfully. Jianqin lowered his head in thought. He could still clearly remember when he had helped the kingdom of Jessen fend off the 4 kingdoms a few years ago. He had swept through a treasury, and he had accidentally found an incomplete diagram of a saint-tier battle skill. However, that diagram clearly had nothing to do with this one. They were probably 2 different battle skills. Afterward, Jianqin checked the other 3 items. There were a large number of supreme-grade crystal coins in the space ring, amounting to over 10 million in total. Other than the crystal coins, there were several hundred monster cores as well. There were Class 5 to Class 7 monster cores, and there was even a Class 8 monster core. As for that thin book, it recorded an incomplete cultivation method. There was only a small portion of it. The book recorded the comprehension of the 8 Wastelands Emperor as well as some matters regarding his later years. It was also incomplete. Aside from the space ring, the other 3 items are all incomplete. They're basically useless trash. Is the 8 Wastelands Emperor trying to trick us? Newbies could not help but curse. Jianqin ignored Newbies' complaints. He looked at the others and said, "How should we distribute these items? Do any of you have any suggestions?" Hearing this, MOG and the others looked at each other. Then one of them said, "The king's strength is extraordinary. He's more capable of protecting these items. As such, I suggest we leave these items with the king for him to keep. As for the final distribution, we'll discuss it in detail after we leave the 8 Wasteland Shrine." I agree with this suggestion. The suggestion received everyone's support. Jianqin did not argue and took the items away, storing them in an independent space ring. The few of them checked the inside of the palace again, almost turning the entire palace upside down, but to no avail. Then they left the place. The few of them walked out of the hall and headed towards the next hall that no one had entered before. After breaking through a formation, they successfully obtained the item placed inside the hall. However, the items inside were all the same. There was a space ring with a small fortune, an incomplete book, an incomplete cultivation method, and a small fragment of a saint-tier battle skill. Next, Jianqin and the others entered a 3rd shrine and a 3rd shrine. However, the items they obtained were all the same. It was as if the items in every shrine were the same. Looks like the 8 Wastelands Emperor has divided these items into countless portions and placed them in different shrines. If we want to gather all these items into a complete set, we have to obtain the remaining portion. The Emperor of the Eight Wastelands actually wants us to kill each other. Jianshin's face was rather gloomy. He very quickly understood the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands' intentions. Chapter 918. We've entered 4 halls, and the items in the 4 halls are actually the same. I think the items in the other halls are the same as well, so it looks like we can only gather the items in all the halls to form the true Tian level battle saint technique and the cultivation method and comprehension left behind by the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands. Newbies thought of this as well, so he murmured to himself. The light in his eyes flickered as viciousness vaguely appeared. Clearly, he had become interested. A gleam of light flashed through Mog's eyes when he saw Jianshin and Newbie's expressions. He said, "Ruler, let's just collect the rest. Whether it's the Tian level battle saint technique or the cultivation method and comprehension left behind by the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands, they're all rare treasures. In particular, no one else in the vast sea realm possesses the Tian level battle saint technique aside from the 3 halls. If Ruler can obtain the complete Tian level battle saint technique and bring it back to the Turtle Clan, the strength of the Turtle Clan will definitely increase by a lot." As soon as Mog finished speaking, Xie Wang retorted, "Are you crazy? There's only 7 of us here, including you. Do you want us to deal with over 100 14th-star experts who are no weaker than us? And since those experts can make it here, they must be exceptional people. Every single one of them is extremely powerful, so who knows if they're hiding any trump cards. Maybe some of them have already grasped a Tian level battle saint technique. They'll be very difficult to deal with." Mog stared at Xie Wang and confidently said, "It's not like you haven't witnessed the ruler's strength. Do you really think those people are his opponent? It'll be a piece of cake for the ruler to kill them. So what if they've grasped a Tian level battle saint technique? They won't have the time to use it. Jianshin, what do you think?" Newbies looked at Jianshin with a questioning gaze, obviously waiting for Jianshin to make a decision. Jianshin shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about this right now. Right now, we are only in the central region of the Eight Wastelands Shrine. There is still a long way to go. Moreover, I believe that the things in the future will be even more precious. There is no need to fight to the death for such a small benefit. All right, let's end this topic here. Let's go out." With that, Jianshin stepped out of the hall. No one noticed the slight disappointment in Mog's eyes. At this time, the rest of the halls had already been visited. The doors were all open, and the things inside had all been taken away. In the surroundings, all the saint rulers stood together with their teammates, carefully guarding against anything. All of their faces were filled with caution. Clearly, they had discovered the secret of the halls as well. "Everyone, may I ask if the things you found in the halls are exactly the same?" An incomplete stone tablet of a Tian level battle saint technique. A scroll of the cultivation notes left behind by the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands. A cultivation method left behind by the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands, and a space ring. At this moment, a heavy voice boomed out, echoing through the entire place. Everyone heard it clearly. The one who spoke was a burly middle-aged man. His upper body was bare, revealing his strong muscles. His lower body was only wearing a pair of shorts. He looked very simple, but his body exuded a wild aura, as if he was a ferocious beast. The surroundings were silent. No one said a word. A few of the experts who recognized the middle-aged man became fearful. The man was a renowned expert of the Heaven's Spirit Hall. His name was Tesnik, and he was a genius of a large tribe. He was also the ruler of a clan, having reached the peak of the 14th star in just over 1,000 years. He had also grasped a Tian-level battle saint technique and could use it with great familiarity. He was extremely powerful, and very few people dared to provoke him. There were even rumors in the sea realm that Tesnik had been cultivating a wondrous king saint technique recently, which had delayed his progress. Otherwise, he probably would have become a 15th star expert long ago. Every single ruler possessed talent that was no weaker than beasts of antiquity. They would definitely become hall elders in the future, or even emperors. They could not be underestimated. Tesniak's sharp gaze slowly swept across the surrounding people, taking in the expressions on everyone's faces. He smiled and said, "Everyone, I believe many of you understand that this is just one of the Octaterra Great Emperor's schemes. He divided the complete item into several parts and placed them in different palaces for us to obtain. His goal is to make us kill each other." Tesnik paused slightly before continuing, "That's right. We can't deny that the Tian-level battle saint technique and the cultivation method of the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands, as well as his knowledge, are treasures that can only be found through luck. However, don't forget that we're still in the central region of the Eight Wastelands Divine Hall. I think there will definitely be even more valuable items later on, so there's no need for us to fight to the death for something like this and give up on the even more valuable items later on." Quite a few people were startled when they heard Tesniak's words. They immediately came to their senses, and the sharp aura they gave off lessened slightly. "Looks like we won't be able to fight." Nubiz's slightly disappointed voice rang out from beside Jianchen. From his expression, he seemed to be eager for them to start fighting. "Let's go," Jianchen murmured gently. He passed through the halls and made his way into the depths of the Divine Hall. He was not in a hurry at all to collect the Saint-tier battle skill fragments and the cultivation method and knowledge left behind by the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands. Right now, everyone was still in the completely sealed Divine Hall. If they did not find a way to leave at the very end, no one would be able to leave. There would be plenty of opportunities to collect the remaining items later on. Jianchen was the first to leave with a few people. As they made their way through the wide path between the halls at a steady pace, they immediately attracted the gazes of many people in the surroundings. Everyone was still in a stalemate right now, so those who dared to leave at a time like this were obviously extremely eye-catching. It's that terrifying Turtle King. When everyone recognized Jianchen at the very front, a sliver of deep fear appeared in their eyes. Jianchen had knocked back 7 experts with a single strike when they were killing the beasts earlier, heavily injuring them. This had already shocked everyone. From that moment onwards, everyone's gazes toward Jianchen underwent an overwhelming change. Who said that the people of the Turtle Clan were skilled in defense and weak in offense? The appearance of the ruler of the Turtle Clan before them had completely overturned their understanding of the Turtle Clan. Tesnik stared deeply at Jianchen's back as a sliver of sharpness appeared in the depths of his eyes. He thought, "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, you will be a powerful opponent of mine. We will fight sooner or later. I wonder if you're stronger or if I'm stronger." There was only a single legacy of the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands, so it was fated that only one out of over 100 experts could receive the legacy. The Divine Hall of the Eight Wastelands would definitely be dyed in blood for the sake of obtaining the legacy. Other than Tesnik, there were many other renowned experts among the 160 people who had entered the Divine Hall of the Eight Wastelands. Although they were not as renowned as Tesnik, they still had many trump cards hidden up their sleeves and were difficult to deal with. However, at this moment, the gazes they used to look at Tesnik and the ruler of the Turtle Clan were filled with extremely well-hidden killing intent. Basically, all of them had come for the legacy, and if they wanted to obtain the legacy, they needed to eliminate their most powerful opponents first. Without a doubt, Jianchen and Tesnik had become the most powerful opponents in everyone's eyes. Unknowingly, the outstanding Jianchen and the renowned Tesnik had become thorns in the eyes of many people. They were targets that needed to be eliminated. After Jianchen's group left, the other experts all left with various thoughts in their minds. They made their way to the depths of the Divine Hall of the Eight Wastelands from various directions. There were many formations hidden within the Divine Hall, but they were nowhere near as powerful as those on Dragon Island. After the passage of time, they were nowhere near as powerful as before. Jianchen's group of 7 blazed their way through. destroying many formations and barriers before finally arriving at the depths of the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands. An extremely huge palace stood in the depths of the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands. It had a total of 9 floors, and each floor was over 30 meters tall. Jianqin's group arrived before the palace. They stopped at the entrance and raised their heads to look at the majestic hall. Suddenly, they felt like they were hallucinating for some reason, as if the palace before them had become a world of its own. It was a world of its own, resonating with the world from afar. It was filled with a vast, majestic presence. More and more people gathered outside the palace. The other experts hurried over from various places as well. Many of them were in horrible shape, having been greatly tormented by the formations. An extremely small number of people had even suffered injuries of varying degrees, but none of them had lost their lives. Their harvest along the way was pitifully pitiful. Apart from a few monster cores from killing vicious beasts and the incomplete items they had found in the various halls, there was nothing else. This palace should be the core of the hall. It must be where the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands once lived. There should be quite a few treasures in there. There must be quite a few treasures left behind by the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands, but we've only seen a few things along the way. I think the rest of the treasures must be in this palace. The legacy of the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands must be in there. It must be much more dangerous inside than outside. Everyone discussed with one another. Their gazes towards the palace were filled with desire and greed. Once they obtained the legacy of the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands, they would definitely become an emperor in the future. This was an irresistible temptation to all of them. Although everyone was very anxious in their hearts, no one took action. Everyone wanted to obtain the inheritance of the Eight Desolation Great Emperor. However, no one wanted to walk in the front and become a pathfinder. There was certainly an unknown danger waiting for them ahead. The one who walked in the front would most likely be the first to die. Chapter 919. Jianqin did not move either. Instead, he stood there and observed every inch of the palace. He expanded the senses of his soul as much as he could. Although he could only reach 1,000 meters away and was unable to see through the structure, it was still much better than seeing with his naked eye. A while later, Jianqin seemed to have discovered something. He faintly smiled and no longer hesitated, making his way forward. His actions immediately attracted the attention of everyone. They all stared at him, wanting to use Jianqin's actions to probe the situation. At the same time, they secretly stored up energy, preparing to charge in at any time. Jianqin slowly made his way toward the majestic palace. Just when he was 100 meters away from the palace, a powerful pulse of energy immediately appeared from the ground. A blue barrier rapidly rose up from the ground, forming a circular barrier that trapped the palace and blocked Jianqin outside. The palace is actually protected by a barrier. Cries of surprise rang out from the crowd. Everyone's faces were filled with joy. Such a scene only proved that there was definitely something extraordinary in this palace. Jianqin stabbed the barrier with his saint armament, but the barrier did not even shake. The strength of the barrier had exceeded everyone's expectations. Jianqin's face sank slightly. The light in his eyes flickered as the innate ability of the winged tiger flashed through his head. He called out, "This barrier is extremely powerful. It's not something a single person can get through. Everyone, why don't we all work together to get through it? We need to get through the barrier if we want to enter the palace. I agree with the suggestion of the ruler of the Turtle Clan. I'm willing to contribute a portion of my strength to get through the barrier." Tesniak was the first to express his opinion. Afterward, the others all joined in as well. Very soon, everyone had reached a consensus. Surging ripples of energy radiated from everyone. At that moment, all the experts began to move. They were all charging up a powerful attack to get through the barrier. No one wanted to remain outside. With that order, over 100 experts unleashed powerful attacks in unison. Over 100 powerful energy shock waves shot out from their hands at the same time, slamming into the barrier with terrifying energy shock waves. With a great boom, the violent ripples of energy formed a terrifying storm that wreaked havoc in the divine hall. It pushed back all the people gathered outside. No one was able to remain standing. The blue barrier around the palace only rippled slightly, like the ripples created by a pebble tossed into a calm lake. It returned to its original state very quickly. The combined attack of over 109th Heavenly Layer Saint Rulers had only managed to create such a weak effect on the barrier. Everyone became stern when they saw this. The barrier's defenses far exceeded what they had expected. It had basically reached a terrifying level that they could not accept. The Emperor of the Eight Wastelands is such a bastard. He actually left behind such a powerful barrier here. Even 15-star experts will struggle to get through it, let alone us. Someone could not help but curse. The way out should be in the palace. If we can't enter the palace, we won't be able to leave at all. Does the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands want to trap all of us here? Just what is the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands trying to do? His divine hall only allows peak 14-star experts to enter. Yet, he has cast down such a powerful barrier. He clearly doesn't want us to enter. Does he really want to trap us here for the rest of our lives? Everyone's faces became extremely ugly. They all furiously roared out. Jianqin frowned in thought for a while before loudly saying, "Everyone calm down. The barrier before us is far more powerful than we imagined. We can't hold back at all if we want to get through it. Why don't we all work together and see if we can get through it?" This was their only hope right now. Everyone immediately came to a consensus and began to move. Immediately, a terrifying pulse of energy several times greater than before radiated from everyone. This time, basically everyone used their most powerful attack. They used all their strength without holding back, forming a terrifying pillar of energy that viciously slammed against the barrier. When over 109th Heavenly Layer Saint Rulers unleashed their full strength at the same time, it was so powerful that even 5th Heavenly Layer Saint Kings could die. However, the same thing happened when the terrifying attack struck the barrier. The barrier only shook slightly, easily enduring the terrifying attack that was enough to kill a holy emperor at the 5th Heavenly Layer. This time, everyone's faces became extremely sunken. The divine hall of the Eight Wastelands had been completely sealed off. Only by entering the hall could they leave. If they could not get through the barrier, they would not be able to leave. A gleam of light flickered through Tisnike's eyes. He yelled out, "Let's do it again. I hope no one holds back at all. All those who know Tian-level saint techniques, use them as well as the energy within you. If we can't get through this barrier, we can forget about leaving." A powerful aura radiated from this Nike. Following that, a terrifying pressure from the heavens and the earth broke through the barrier of the shrine and descended from the sky, filling the entire space. Under the pressure of this pressure, the air stopped flowing and everything fell silent. It was as if even time had stopped. Tisnike had been forced to use a Tian-level saint technique. Many of the saint rulers present became determined when they saw Tisnike's actions. They no longer bothered with hiding anything and used their greatest trump cards. Immediately, over 20 more terrifying presences descended from the sky. Over 20 Tian-level saint techniques were used at the same time. The terrifying pressure caused the sky to tremble. Even though they were in the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands, the space there was greatly affected and distorted. The rest of the 100 or so experts felt suffocated, making it difficult for them to breathe. More than 20 Tian-level saint techniques were unleashed at the same time. Such a magnificent scene had never appeared in the world of the sea. Jianqin shivered inside. Tian-level saint techniques were extremely difficult to comprehend. Even a few Holy Emperor experts had failed to grasp them. He had never thought that over 20 people out of the 160 who had entered the divine hall of the Eight Wastelands would have grasped Tian-level saint techniques. This number had indeed exceeded his expectations. The Tian-level sane techniques were charged up very quickly. At this moment, the other experts no longer held back. They all used their trump cards. Those who possessed the Holy Emperor's force all began to use it, while those who did not possess the Holy Emperor's force all began to charge up their strongest attack. Jianchen did not remain idle either. The saint weapon in his hand shone with a dazzling, dark light as a destructive presence coiled around it. It gave off a chilling presence. Kill! With Tisnaik's bellow, everyone moved at the same time. Over 20 Tian-level saint techniques and over 100 strands of Holy Emperor's force all turned into a furious dragon, viciously slamming into the barrier with a devastating presence. Boom! With a deafening sound, the attacks from over 100 experts struck the barrier, causing it to shake violently. However, it stabilized very quickly and did not shatter. However, the attacks from over 100 experts immediately formed a violent storm of energy that rebounded back, striking everyone in the end. Everyone was sent flying by the powerful energy storm that bounced back. Many of them were seriously injured. Blood sprayed out from their mouths and dyed the sky red. If it were not for the fact that most of their attacks had been nullified by the barrier, probably no one would have survived. Everyone was blown several thousand meters away before landing on the ground in horrible shape. Their faces were all pale, and even Jianchen and newbies were no exception. They were injured by the terrifying energy. However, Jianchen had the chaotic body, so his situation was much better than everyone else. He only suffered some insignificant wounds. However, when they saw that the barrier was still intact, all of them became stunned. Despair filled their hearts. Over 20 Tian-level saint techniques and over 100 experts were unable to break through the barrier. The strength of the barrier had once again overturned everyone's expectations. It was not something they could break through at all. Roar! Suddenly, a loud roar of a beast came from all around them, and the ground began to tremble slightly. Countless figures of ferocious beasts appeared from all directions, and they all rushed towards the group with red eyes. There were so many of them that it was impossible to count, far surpassing the group of ferocious beasts that they had encountered the first time. God damn it, of all times, these vicious beasts just had to appear when we're all injured. There are so many of them too. How are we supposed to deal with them? Do we have to enter the palace the same way we left the maze? We have to use the blood of these vicious beasts to construct the formation. There's no time. Everyone heal quickly, or we'll be eaten by the vicious beasts. Everyone immediately took out healing pills and consumed them. They began to use every second they had to heal their wounds and recover the energy they had expended. Basically, every single expert present had the support of a large organization. The healing pills they carried were extremely famous in the Sea Realm. They were extremely precious, and some supreme-grade pills were even as effective as Radiant Spirit pills. After consuming the pills, their complexions rapidly improved. Although it was impossible for them to fully recover in such a short amount of time, they had stabilized and reduced by a lot at the very least. The vicious beasts in the surroundings were densely packed. There were just too many of them, so the saint rulers were surrounded by a flood of beasts very soon. A bloody battle began once again. The beasts varied in strength from Class 5 to Class 7. There would be Class 8 beasts mixed in from time to time, giving everyone an extremely great pressure. Quite a few people became injured very soon, so they had no choice but to condense armor with the little remaining Holy Emperor's force in their bodies. At the same time, they shoved various healing pills into their mouths, like jelly beans. Jianchen newbies and Xiaowang also did their best to kill the vicious beasts. They were covered in blood, so it was impossible to tell whether it was theirs or the beasts'. Newbies' hands had already become golden. He constantly stabbed them into the bodies of the vicious beasts. He first used poison to suppress their strength before tearing them to pieces. Several golden threads would shoot out from his fingertips from time to time. piercing the heads of the Class 5 and 6 magical beasts and killing them in a single strike. At the same time, he extracted their monster cores. Jianqin constantly swung his saint weapon. Dense blurs enveloped the space in front of him as he mercilessly reaped the lives of the vicious beasts. The vicious beasts below Class 7 were unable to endure a single strike from Jianqin and were all slain. Only Class 7 magical beasts managed to last for a while, but they were still unable to escape death in the end. Chapter 920. Tesniak was covered in blood as well. Even though he was powerful, it was difficult for him to ensure that he remained unscathed when surrounded by so many vicious beasts of the same level. His burly body was covered in teeth marks and claw marks from the vicious beasts. Blood had already dyed his entire body red. It was impossible to tell whether it was his own blood or the vicious beasts. Nubis was covered in wounds as well. He was completely covered in blood. Out of the 100 or so experts present, Jianqin was probably the only one who remained unscathed. Jianqin's chaotic body was extremely tough. Regular Class 7 vicious beasts were unable to harm him at all. Their sharp claws and teeth were unable to penetrate Jianqin's defenses. Only the vicious beasts at the 7th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler or higher could pose a threat to Jianqin. However, Jianqin would kill these vicious beasts as soon as he discovered them. Xiaowang, Mog, and the 3 others followed closely behind Jianqin and Nubis. They were slightly weaker than Jianqin and Nubis, so it was very difficult for them to fend off the attacks of so many vicious beasts. Even with that being the case, they were all injured. Battle cries shook the surroundings as the violent booms from the collisions of energy constantly rang out. Violent ripples of energy wreaked havoc throughout the divine hall. The entire ground was dyed red with blood. The large amount of blood that had piled up had basically gathered into a small pool. Suddenly, the blood on the ground rapidly decreased. It quickly seeped into the ground and was absorbed by the earth before flowing into the barrier of the palace. Its whereabouts were unknown. No one noticed this scene. At the same time, an extremely powerful pulse of the soul radiated from the palace. It was as if a powerful soul that had fallen into a slumber was slowly awakening. The pulse of the soul was blocked by the barrier, so it did not spread outside. As a result, none of the experts fighting the vicious beasts outside could sense it. It's been 20,000 years. Someone has finally come in. Kill, kill, kill to your heart's content. Let the blood dye the entire divine hall red. An obscure voice rang out from the empty palace. It was impossible to tell whether it was a man or a woman. It was filled with an evil presence. No one knew what was going on inside the palace. Outside, more than 100 experts fought fiercely with the dire beasts for 3 days before they finally killed all the thousands of dire beasts. Among them, the number of Class 7 dire beasts that died at their hands had reached an uncountable number. Even the number of Class 8 dire beasts was as many as 20, but these Class 8 dire beasts were all below the 5th firmament. At this moment, the ground was filled with the corpses of the vicious beasts. The 100 or so experts were all panting as they sat on the corpses of the vicious beasts. Their faces were filled with exhaustion. Their bodies were covered with hideous wounds. They were in a very sorry state. This battle was extremely tragic. The number and strength of the ferocious beasts were much stronger than the group of ferocious beasts they had encountered when they first came in. Moreover, the ferocious beasts suddenly launched an attack when they were heavily injured, catching them off guard. After this battle, almost everyone had exhausted the power of the Holy Emperor in their bodies. Even the various healing pills and vitality recovery pills they had brought were running low. Over 40 experts had died in this battle. They had all died under the claws of the Class 8 magical beasts. Only 100 or so people had survived. If it were not for the armor condensed from the Holy Emperor's power that blocked many fatal threats for them, they probably would not have been able to last for so long. They would have all been wiped out long ago. Jianqin was in the best condition out of all of them. Although he had also been injured by a Class 8 magical beast, his chaotic body allowed him to make a full recovery without the use of any pills due to his great recovery. At this moment, he was leisurely collecting monster cores from the piles of corpses by himself. Tesniak sat on the corpse of a Class 8 vicious beast as he silently healed. He opened his eyes and glanced at Jianqin, who was busy with his work. He said emotionlessly, "The defenses of the ruler of the Turtle Clan really are powerful. I've finally witnessed it today." Jianqin raised his head and glanced at Tesnik. He said nothing and continued to collect monster cores. It was as if these monster cores were much more important than leaving this place in his eyes. At this moment, Jianqin seemed to discover something. His hand froze as he cried out, "All the blood on the ground has actually vanished." Hearing this, the surviving powerhouses no longer cared about healing. They immediately stood up from the corpses of the beasts and kicked the corpses away, revealing the hard ground of the temple. The ground was extremely dry. Aside from a few fragments of the corpses, there was not a single drop of blood. There was not even a single trace of blood. Strange, where did the blood from the beasts go? And there is no formation on the ground. Could it be that entering the barrier is not the same as walking out of the maze? Someone asked in a puzzled voice. His tone was very weak. "Everyone look. There's not a single drop of blood left in these beasts." Another person cried out. With that, everyone immediately chopped a few corpses to pieces. As expected, they discovered that all the blood had vanished. Not a single drop remained. Jianqin's face changed. He immediately thought back to when he removed the monster cores from the heads of the beasts. At first, he did not pay too much attention to it, but now that he thought about it, he discovered that there was no blood at all when he removed the monster cores from the heads of the beasts. "Look, all the blood in their bodies has flowed out as well," another person cried out. Another cry of surprise rang out. It was an old man who was holding the corpse of a sea race expert. His face was filled with shock. Everyone's face became very gloomy. The scene in front of them was very strange. It was already beyond their understanding. No one knew whether what was happening in front of them was good or bad. "If I've guessed correctly, all the blood has been sucked away by the Divine Hall," an old man said after a while. This was the only explanation that could explain what was happening in front of him. But why would the Divine Hall suck away all the blood? Someone asked in confusion. They were utterly confused. At this moment, the ground began to tremble slightly again. Heavy footsteps rang out from the distance, accompanied by several vast and surging auras that filled the entire sky. The sudden disturbance caused all the experts who had just relaxed to tense up. When they looked in the direction of the sound, all of them paled. All they saw were 5 30-meter-tall beasts slowly approaching them. Every single one of them radiated with a terrifying presence. They had all reached the 16th star, powerful existences beyond the 5th heavenly layer of Saint Kings. This god-damned divine hall of the 8 wastelands. Why are there so many feral beasts here? We're done for. We're dead for sure. Despair filled everyone's face. Even if they were at their peak condition, they would not be able to deal with the 515th star feral beasts before them, let alone the fact that they were all exhausted right now. They could not even deal with a single 15th star feral beast with their remaining battle prowess, let alone the 5 of them before them. Jianqin became stern as well. The light in his eyes flickered. He had already secretly used the artifact spirit to wake up the white tiger that had been cultivating in the artifact space. Once the situation reached a point of no return, he would use the white tiger to enter the barrier. The white tiger's ability to ignore all formations and barriers had always been Jianqin's greatest trump card. Unless he was forced into a dead end, he would never expose the white tiger to the public. "Jianqin, what do we do? The strength of these 5 feral beasts is beyond what we can deal with. Only death awaits us if we stay here. Why don't we enter the artifact space?" Newbies sternly asked Jianqin through a communication technique. Jianchen stared at the 5 feral beasts closely. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his head, and he yelled out, "Everyone, we need to enter the barrier if we want to live. These feral beasts have no intelligence, so if we use them properly, we can use them to break through the barrier." Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard that. Tesniak looked at Jianchen and said with a deep voice, "King, what are your chances of success? Do you have a better idea aside from that?" Jianchen questioned. "All right, we're going to die anyway, so let's take the risk and try. This is our only chance at survival," a middle-aged man with blood-stained eyes said boldly. A middle-aged man covered in blood said in a heroic tone. He had the spirit of a warrior who would never return. He intended to make a final struggle. "All right, ruler of the Turtle Clan, I'll trust you just this once. What do you want us to do?" Tesniak asked. He thought inside, "It would be for the best if we can break through the barrier, but if we can't, I'll just have to use that power to break through the barrier myself." Jianchen sternly said, "Let's split into 2 groups right now. Those with Tian-level saint techniques will form the first group and use them at the same time. The people in the second group will gather in front of the barrier and attract the attention of the 5 feral beasts. We have to make the 5 feral beasts unleash their most powerful attacks at us at the same time, and then we'll immediately dodge and attack the barrier at the same time. When the attacks of the 5 feral beasts hit the barrier, the people in the first group will immediately use their Tian-level saint techniques to attack the barrier. I think the combined attack of over 20 Tian-level saint techniques and 5 16th star feral beasts should be enough to break through the barrier." Everyone could not help but secretly nod when they heard Jianchen's analysis. They had already agreed with the plan. Afterwards, everyone began to move. The 20 or so people who had grasped the Tian-level saint technique gathered together. After consuming a large number of recovery pills, they immediately began to channel the Tian-level saint technique. The remaining people who did not have Tian-level saint techniques gathered together in a group as well. They unleashed powerful attacks at the feral beasts that rapidly approached them. With a violent boom, the 5 feral beasts were immediately drowned by several dozen powerful ripples of energy. Although it was very difficult for such powerful attacks to harm them, they were deeply infuriated. The 5 ferocious beasts let out a deafening roar in unison as they charged towards the crowd with a wild aura. The 2 sides rapidly closed in, but just when the 5 feral beasts were about to collide with everyone actually dodged to the side as quickly as they could. Boom! The 5 feral beasts slammed into the barrier behind them heavily, producing a violent boom. At the same time, everyone's attacks and over 20 Tian-level saint techniques landed on the barrier with devastating might. The violent ripples of energy shook up the space, blowing everyone away. They vomited blood, becoming even more injured. No one paid attention to the injuries on their bodies as they stared at the barrier without blinking. The barrier began to tremble violently. In the end, a crack that was only 10 meters wide was ripped open. The crack was slowly closing. Everyone's eyes lit up as they ravished with joy. Without any hesitation, they all climbed up from the ground as quickly as they could and charged toward the crack crazily. The crack was slowly closing up. Before long, it would return to normal. Everyone charged toward the crack as quickly as they could. This was their only hope of escaping. Jianchen was the least injured, so he was the fastest out of everyone. He grabbed Nubie's and Diablo's shoulders and used the illusory flash. He left behind an afterimage where he was and crossed several hundred meters in a single instance, entering the crack. Chapter 9:21. Bang! 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 After tearing the experts, who were blocked outside the barrier into pieces, the 5 beasts were still not satisfied. They kept ramming into the barrier, wanting to kill everyone who was hiding inside the barrier. The strength of these 5 beasts was between the 5th and 6th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. Their attacks were very powerful. Every time they rammed into the barrier, it would shake violently. But in the end, they were unable to break the barrier and hurt the people inside. Seeing this scene, everyone inside the barrier finally breathed a sigh of relief. Their hearts that were in their throats finally calmed down. Everyone's backs were drenched in cold sweat. Just now, if they entered the barrier a little later, they would have ended up like those experts. Now, nearly a third of the 160 experts had been lost. The people who survived did not leave. Instead, they sat cross-legged inside the barrier to heal their wounds. No one could guarantee that there would not be any danger in the following path. In their current state, they could no longer deal with any unexpected events. Jianshan, Newbies, Evil King, and MOG also gathered together to heal their wounds. At the same time, they recovered their vitality that they had lost. After fighting with the beasts for 3 days, everyone had consumed a lot of vitality. Almost all of them relied on medicine to survive. Sigh, it's a pity that the incomplete items left behind by the 8 Wastelands Great Emperor are still on them. If we don't take the space rings from their hands, we can forget about collecting the cultivation experience, cultivation method, and heaven-level battle saint technique left behind by the 8 Wastelands Great Emperor. In the distance, an old man stared at the corpses outside the barrier with a regretful expression. Hearing this, Jianshan glanced at the space rings outside the barrier. His eyes flickered. He was also hesitating whether to let the white tiger pass through the barrier to take the space rings back. This barrier was set up by a holy emperor in the past. It still maintains a powerful defense. I wonder if Little White can pass through it successfully. Jianshan was also uncertain. After hesitating for a while, he gave up in the end. Elder Hong once told me that apart from the inheritance of the 8 Wastelands Great Emperor, there is also this Divine Hall. As long as I can enter the core of the Divine Hall, I can control the Divine Hall. I have to find a way to enter the core of the 8 Wastelands Divine Hall and obtain the Divine Hall, Jianshan thought as his gaze became more and more determined. A few days later, some of them finally recovered from their injuries. They were all glowing as they continued to walk into the palace in high spirits. Jianshan did not stop either. He led the healed newbies and Diablo into the palace as well. Seeing how Jianshan and the others had left, Morgie and the others hesitated slightly before giving up on the thought of continuing to heal. They stood up and followed Jianshan. With their departure, the number of people at the edge of the barrier immediately decreased by half. However, there were still several dozen experts who remained where they were, silently healing. They planned to enter once they had fully recovered. Otherwise, even if they came across any treasures, they would not have the ability to fight for them. Jianshan walked in the middle of the group in an extremely low-key manner, while Tesniak walked at the very front. The power of the Holy Emperor within him was much greater than the others. After fighting the vicious beasts for 3 days, his Holy Emperor power had yet to disperse. It had condensed into an extremely tough armor on him, preventing him from being ambushed along the way. The next part of the journey was extremely peaceful. Everyone climbed up the stairs and finally arrived before the huge doors of the palace. They all stopped at the same time. Everyone, let's push open the doors together. Tesniak turned around and said to the people behind him. His gaze paused on Jianshan for a while before moving away very soon. Don't worry, Tesniak said to the people behind him. Everyone nodded silently. Immediately, they propped up an energy shield around their bodies and pushed open the door of the palace together. With a creak, the heavy doors of the palace were slowly pushed open by everyone's combined efforts, revealing the scenery inside. It was not like the halls in the central region of the Divine Hall, where it would suffer from a powerful blast of energy. The interior of the palace was rather dim, but it was decorated with gold and jade. It was filled with extremely precious works of art. It was extremely luxurious. Several dozen experts stood outside the doors as they silently observed the interior of the palace. A while later, they finally crossed the tall threshold and entered the palace. They quickly began to search. This is the fur of a Class 8 magical beast on the Tianyuan continent. It's extremely precious, but I never thought it would be used as a carpet here. an expert cried out. An expert cried out. He stared at the huge white carpet on the ground and studied it carefully. His face was filled with fondness as he began to collect the entire carpet into his space ring. This is an extremely rare spiritual wood. It can increase the rate at which energy of the world gathers. I never thought it would be used to make chairs. If you cultivate while sitting on them, your cultivation speed will increase drastically. Another expert pointed at the chairs placed on both sides of the hall. Then he began to put the chairs into his interspatial ring. The chairs completely made from spiritual would immediately cause quite a few people to fight over them. Over a dozen experts began to fight over the chairs in a fearful manner. Everyone obtained 1 or 2 chairs. I got this chair first. Don't tell me you want to snatch it from me. What do you mean you got it first? I clearly placed my hand on it first. An argument rang out as 2 experts began to argue over the armrests of the chairs. Neither of them gave in, so they began to fight very soon. No one paid any attention to them. Everyone continued to search through the hall. Suddenly, Jianshin's eyes narrowed. He stared at the huge, 10-meter-tall throne at the very top. The throne was completely blue and shone with a hazy light. He could tell with a single glance that it was extraordinary. However, Jianshin could clearly sense an extremely powerful energy hidden within the throne. The energy was extremely pure, although it was also water-attributed energy, like the supreme-grade crystal coins. It was far, far purer than the supreme-grade crystal coins. Comparing the two was like comparing a Class 5 monster core to a Class 7 monster core. Great Poseidon, what am I seeing? Heavens, this is just unbelievable. I've actually seen a god-tier crystal. A cry of surprise rang out. An old man was staring at the throne without blinking. Excessive excitement caused his old face to flush red. His eyes were filled with intense greed. God-tier crystal. There's actually a god-tier crystal here. Heavens, it's actually a god-tier crystal. I've never even heard of such a large piece of god-tier crystal before. More and more people noticed the throne that emitted a misty glow, and they exclaimed in succession. Their voices were filled with shock and disbelief, and it was quickly replaced by greed. It really is a god-tier crystal, a throne made entirely of god-tier crystal. The Emperor of the 8 Wastelands is truly generous. Greed filled Tesniak's eyes as well. God-tier crystals were above supreme-grade crystals. The water-attributed energy they contained was extremely pure. It was something that could only be chanced upon and not sought after. It only existed in legends. Many people would never see one in their entire lives. The value of such a large piece of god-tier crystal was inestimable. Everyone found it difficult to resist the temptation of the god-tier crystal before them. They all charged at it, wanting to take it for themselves. The person closest to the throne had already arrived before it. However, as soon as his hand touched the throne, a trident stabbed at him from the side, forcing him to pull back his hand. In the blink of an eye, the palace descended into a chaotic battle. For the sake of this piece of god-tier crystal, everyone began a great battle for the first time. Powerful shockwaves wreaked havoc in the palace, but they were unable to destroy anything. Tesniak joined the battle as well. He was extremely powerful. With his twin blades, he repelled one opponent after another. Very soon, he arrived before the god-tier crystal. There were very few people who were his opponent. However, just when he was about to put the crystal into his space ring, Jianshin, who had been watching from afar, finally interfered. Jianshin wielded the saint armament as he radiated with a soaring sword chi. It was as if he had become a sword. He was the sword, and the sword was him. Swish! Jianshin left behind an afterimage where he stood. He had already shot past the crowd at an unbelievable speed and arrived before the god-tier crystal. The saint weapon in his hand shone with a black light as it stabbed towards Tisnik's hand with a destructive presence. Tesniak had always been secretly paying attention to Jianchen's movements. In his eyes, only the ruler of the turtle clan before him could make him feel pressured. A cold light immediately flashed through his eyes when he saw Jianchen attack him. He pulled back his hand from the crystal and bellowed out. He swung his blades at Jianchen as hard as he could. The saint armament collided with Tesniak's blades and immediately erupted with a powerful ripple of energy. The weapons in their hands seemed to stick to the ground, becoming stuck in a stalemate. Only powerful ripples of energy radiated from the point of contact. The two of them stared at each other. Their gazes were extremely sharp. Jianchen was emotionless. His face was cold, and he seemed composed and composed. However, Tesniak was stern and extremely sunken. There was even a sliver of shock on his face. Arg! The stalemate did not last for very long. Suddenly, Tesniak bellowed out, and an even more terrifying energy surged out from his body. It passed through the blades in his hands and collided with Jianchen's king saint weapon viciously. Boom! The stalemate between the two of them was finally broken with a boom. They were forced back by the violent ripples of energy. Jianchen stood a few meters away. He sheathed his sword and coldly stared at Tesniak. Tesniak also stared at Jianchen with a sharp gaze. His breathing was rather ragged, and his complexion was very ugly. Ruler of the Turtle Clan, your strength has completely exceeded my expectations, Tesniak said with a deep voice. He knew that he was not Jianchen's opponent from the clash. Jianchen used the saint armament, so his battle prowess was equivalent to the Holy Emperor at the third heavenly layer. Although Tesniak was also very powerful, he was not powerful enough to fight against the third heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. As a result, he had suffered a crushing defeat against Jianchen. Chapter 9:22. At this moment, the huge throne completely composed of god tier crystal suddenly vanished. Just as Jianchen and Tesniak were fighting, an expert used the throne as a cover to silently approach the throne from the other side. He stowed the throne away in his space ring, and without any hesitation, he excitedly fled into the distance. Sharp killing intent flashed through Jianchen's eyes. He used the illusory flash and chased after the person as a blur. He suddenly stabbed out with his sword, aiming for the person's back. The expert bellowed out, and a vast amount of the Holy Emperor's power immediately surged out from his body, quickly condensing into a set of armor. A portion of the Holy Emperor's power condensed into a 3-inch wide ball of energy in his left hand, pulsing with terrifying energy. Ruler of the Turtle Clan, if you keep pressing on, I'll just have to take you down with me, the person yelled at Jianchen with the Holy Emperor's power in an attempt to threaten Jianchen. However, Jianchen ignored his threat. The saint weapon stabbed into the armor condensed from the Holy Emperor's power with devastating energy. Ding! When the Emperor's saint weapon and the armor came into contact, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. A powerful force exploded and formed a pushing force that sent him flying. The armor he was wearing was quickly covered in cracks and shattered with a loud bang. The expert, who took the divine grade crystal, flew back dozens of meters before crashing to the ground. Looking at his shattered armor, his heart was filled with shock. The armor had been condensed from the Holy Emperor's power, so he knew just how powerful it was. It had been able to remain unscathed even when several Class 7 vicious beasts worked together. Yet it had shattered from a single strike from Jianchen. He found this unbelievable. Impossible. The Turtle Clan is a race with powerful defenses and weak attacks. The ruler of the Turtle Clan is clearly at the peak of the 14th star. So how is he so powerful? The expert was extremely shocked. However, at this moment, a blur flashed before him. Jianchen had already arrived before him. The saint weapon shone with a black light as it stabbed toward him with a devastating power that made him tremble in fear. Ruler of the Turtle Clan, you asked for this. Jianchen made a decision. With a wave of his hand, he tossed the Holy Emperor's power he had condensed toward Jianqin. Jianqin's attack changed. The saint weapon that had originally been aimed at the expert was now aimed at the Holy Emperor's power. Boom! With a great boom, the Holy Emperor's power was shattered by Jianqin's attack. The violent shockwaves from the explosion viciously struck Jianqin's body. Jianqin retreated uncontrollably. He had already suffered some light injuries, but they did not affect him at all. Jianqin's gaze became colder and colder. This gaze would only appear when his killing intent surged. He stomped off the ground and used the illusory flash to continue charging toward the old man. This time, the expert no longer had the power to contend against Jianqin. All he could do was watch as Jianqin approached him. Spurt! The saint weapon pierced through his forehead and through his head, wiping out his soul on the spot. Jianqin took back the old man's space ring and immediately checked it. Only after confirming that the god-tier crystal was inside did he finally let out a sigh of relief. Jianqin had become determined to obtain the god-tier crystal as soon as he saw it. Suddenly, Jianqin's face sank. He could feel over a dozen presences lock onto him. Over a dozen experts had vaguely surrounded him in the surroundings. All of them glared at him. Jianqin's arm trembled, and the saint weapon immediately shone with a black light. A destructive presence swept through the entire hall, pressing toward the experts in an extremely domineering manner. If you still want the crystal, then feel free to come. Jianqin pointed his sword at the sky as he coldly spoke. He radiated with a presence that looked down on the world, as if he did not take the people in front of him seriously at all. Ruler of the Turtle Clan, we don't want to become enemies with you, but it's a little unreasonable for you to monopolize such a large piece of god-tier crystal. Why don't you take it out and give everyone a share? A black-robed old man said with a heavy voice. Although he feared Jianqin very much, the temptation of the god-tier crystal was just too great. At the same time, there were so many people present, so he believed that no matter how powerful the ruler of the Turtle Clan was, he would be outnumbered if all of them worked together. Jianqin raised the space ring with his left hand and said, "The god-tier crystal is here. If you want it, then come and take it." "Ruler, I can't deny that you are indeed very powerful. But are you confident that you can block my Tian-level saint technique?" A young man arrogantly asked. He was one of the people who had grasped the Tian-level saint technique. With that, the sound of the air being torn rang out. Jianqin had already arrived before the young man with lightning-like speed. The king weapon stabbed toward the young man's forehead without any hesitation. The young man was shocked. He had never thought that Jianqin would actually take the initiative to attack. The power of the Holy Emperor immediately surged out of his body in an attempt to block Jianqin's sudden attack. However, this time, Jianqin's sword was countless times faster than before. The strike seemed to break through the limits of space and time, shooting toward the young man as a streak of light. Spurt! The Holy Emperor's power did not have enough time to condense into armor before the king weapon stabbed into his forehead with a jaw-dropping speed, wiping out his soul. What a fast strike! Cries immediately rang out in the surroundings. Everyone's expressions drastically changed. They had become stunned by the speed of Jianqin's strike. The speed of this sword was simply too fast. If they were the ones facing this sword, they would be caught off guard and lose their lives on the spot. A peak saint ruler who had grasped a Tian-level saint technique had died just like that. At that moment, everyone's gazes toward Jianqin changed. Their fear for Jianqin skyrocketed. He was definitely an extremely terrifying opponent. Jianqin slowly drew his king weapon and coldly said, "So what if you've grasped a Tian-level saint technique? You won't have the chance to use it before me." The hall was silent. Everyone stared at Jianqin. No one said anything. Tesnik stood in the distance as he stared at Jianqin. A sliver of sharp killing intent hid in the depths of his eyes as he thought, "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, you are indeed very powerful, but you will still die at my hands in the end." Jianchen slowly glanced past everyone with a sharp gaze and said, "Since no one else has come, the god Tear Crystal is mine now." Jianchen stowed the space ring away before continuing to search through the hall. The tense atmosphere in the hall immediately eased up with Jianchen's actions. Everyone gave up on the idea of competing with Jianchen for the crystal and began to search for other treasures. The blood of the two experts who had died at Jianchen's hands flowed out very quickly as well. They disappeared into the ground, leaving behind no trace at all. Everyone could see this, but they were unable to find the reason for it. After failing to find an answer, even after a while of thought, they just tossed it to the back of their minds and ignored the strange scene. Next, they spent half a day searching through the entire first floor of the palace, taking away many valuable treasures. Almost everything that could be taken away from the first floor was taken away. After making sure that nothing was left behind, they moved on to the second floor. The second floor also had many extremely valuable and rare items, but they were all taken away very soon. At this moment, a great rumble rang out from afar, accompanied by a powerful pulse of energy. The disturbance attracted quite a few people. They all went over to take a look out of curiosity. In the end, they arrived before a huge stone door. A few words were written above the door in a bold and powerful manner. "Treasure room." "This must be where a large amount of treasures are stored," someone cried out in excitement. "This stone door has no mechanism. The only way for us to enter is to break this stone door. Let's work together to break open this stone door," someone suggested. Immediately, several experts began to attack the stone door. With a great rumble, several ninth heavenly layer saint rulers struck the door with their hands, but it remained unscathed. There were not even any cracks. The door has been strengthened by the divine hall. It's become extraordinarily tough. We need to work together to break it open. What are you all hesitating for? Anything that can be stored here must be valuable. There might even be god Tear crystals. Let's all work together to open the door. A few experts tried to incite the crowd with their eyes red with greed. Everyone had come here for the treasures of the 8 wastelands in the first place, so they came to an agreement very quickly and worked together to attack the door. Even Jianshan newbies and the others joined in. A deafening sound rang out. Dozens of powerhouses worked together to launch a powerful attack on the stone door, but the stone door was still intact. "Let me use a Tian-level battle saint technique." An expert with a Tian-level battle saint technique immediately bellowed out and began to charge up. Seeing how someone had begun to use a Tian-level battle saint technique on the door, the remaining people with Tian-level battle saint techniques began to hesitate as well. However, a few more people joined in very soon, using their Tian-level battle saint techniques on the door at the same time. The Tian-level battle saint technique finished charging very quickly and was used by all of them at the same time. They struck the stone door with lightning-like speed. At the same time, the other experts did not stand around idly either. They all used powerful attacks to attack the stone door together with their Tian-level battle saint techniques. Boom! An even more powerful sound rang out, turning into a powerful shockwave that swept out in all directions. Everyone was forced back by the shockwave. The stone door shook violently, shaking off a layer of dust. At the same time, a tiny crack appeared on it. "Let's continue attacking. We'll be able to break open the door after a few more times," someone called out. Afterward, everyone worked together to attack the stone door again. The number of people who used Tian-level battle saint techniques increased to 18. Chapter 9:23. Over 59th heavenly layer saint rulers attacked the stone door as hard as they could once again. This time, there were over a dozen people who used Tian-level saint techniques. A terrifying pressure immediately descended, filling the entire hall. Boom! With a great boom, the full-powered attacks of several dozen experts and a dozen or so Tian-level saint techniques landed on the stone door at almost the same time. The violent shockwaves of energy erupted, forcing everyone back again. In front of this storm-like energy storm, no one was able to stabilize themselves. After a long while, when the energy storm that was wreaking havoc in the palace slowly dissipated, a crack that was about a meter long appeared on the incomparably hard stone door. "The door is just too tough. If this continues, it'll take us a few days at the very least," someone sighed in amazement. He was stern. "The treasures inside must be priceless if they can be stopped by such tough stone doors. Let's try a few more times. We'll be able to get through it sooner or later." An expert refused to give up, encouraging everyone. "Let's rest for a while first. We'll continue after we recover some energy." Afterward, everyone began to recover in various places. In particular, the people who had used the Tian level saint techniques would exhaust them greatly every time they used them. At the same time, they needed to be wary of any sudden attacks from the side, so they did not dare to use the Tian level saint techniques recklessly a second time. They needed to maintain sufficient battle prowess at all times. Afterward, everyone continued to attack the stone door as hard as they could. They basically used their full strength, unleashing all of their strength and using the Tian level saint techniques to attack the stone door with their strongest attacks. The number of people who used the Tian level saint techniques had increased from around a dozen to over 20. All the people who knew the Tian level saint techniques had joined in. Under the bombardment of the crowd, the stone door was continuously damaged. After a few days, the solid stone door was finally blown to pieces, revealing a long passage. Jianshan newbies and Xiaowang cautiously made their way to the treasure room with the crowd. Behind them were MOG and the other three. All of them remained vigilant. Passing through the tunnel, everyone's field of vision suddenly opened up. They had already arrived in an extremely large space. The space seemed more like a warehouse, filled with a large pile of items. When everyone slowly glanced past the items, great joy and greed filled their eyes. There was a mountainous pile of crystal coins in the center of the warehouse. They shone with a dazzling light. All of them were of supreme quality, and there were so many that it was impossible to estimate. Among the mountain of crystal coins, there were also some fist-sized divine-grade crystals mixed in, giving off powerful and pure water elemental energy waves. Around the warehouse, there were iron frames made of fine iron and tables made of spirit wood. There were a dozen weapons of various shapes and sizes hanging on the iron frames. Each weapon radiated with light and emitted powerful energy waves. On the spiritual wood table, there were all kinds of books, small wooden boxes, and pieces of divine-grade crystals. The crystals ranged from the size of a fist to the size of a head. They shone with a hazy light which was quite enchanting. There were many of them. Everyone's eyes were focused on the pile of supreme quality crystal coins and divine quality crystals without exception. Their eyes were filled with greed. They might not value the supreme quality crystal coins, but the temptation of divine quality crystals was unbearable for them. Jianqin glanced around. He could not help but be tempted by the wealth piled up there. However, his gaze did not stop at the crystals. Instead, he stared at the weapons of various shapes and sizes on the shelves. Uncontainable joy filled his eyes. Ruler armaments. There are actually so many ruler armaments here. Jianqin wildly exclaimed inside. To him, the ruler armaments were much more valuable than the god-tier crystals. If he brought the ruler armaments back to the Tianyuan continent and gave them to the experts of the Flame Mercenaries, it would greatly increase the strength of the mercenaries. Whoosh! With a gust of wind, countless experts could not help but charge toward the god-tier crystals and wooden boxes on the tables. No one actually paid any attention to the ruler armaments on the shelves. Ruler armaments were indisputable treasures to the people of the Tianyuan continent, but to the people of the sea race they were still quite valuable, but they were nowhere near as valuable as the god-tier crystals. As a result, all the experts of the sea race focused on the god-tier crystals. No one paid any attention to the ruler armaments or saint armaments. Jianshan newbies Xiaowang and MOG did not hesitate at all. They all charged toward the pile of treasures and began to fight over them in a flurry. However, Jianqin did not charge toward the god-tier crystals and other unknown treasures like them. Instead, he shot toward the shelves with lightning-like speed and quickly stowed away the ruler armaments in his space ring. Afterward, he went to fight over the god-tier crystals. Under the frantic sweep of several dozen experts, all the god-tier crystals and treasures in the surroundings were finally swept clean. All that was left behind was a mountainous pile of supreme quality crystal coins. All the experts were unable to hide their joy and excitement. All of them had benefited greatly. Jianqin had benefited greatly as well. Not only had he obtained over a dozen ruler armaments, but he had also obtained several dozen god-tier crystals, as well as a wooden box with an unknown object inside. With so many god-tier crystals and high-class monster cores, my chaotic body will be able to break through to the third layer very soon, Jianqin thought. At the same time, he made up his mind to enter seclusion as soon as he left this place. He would do his best to break through to the third layer of the chaotic body. This is actually the notes of the 8 Wastelands Emperor. A cry of surprise rang out. One of the experts had already opened a wooden box and took out a small booklet the size of a palm. I actually have the diary of Emperor Gu Lo. Another cry rang out. Another cry of surprise rang out. This time, the person who spoke was Tiznik. He was currently holding a book in his hands, his expression filled with shock and disbelief. What? The diary of Emperor Gu Lu has actually appeared. Is it Emperor Gu Lu who passed away 30,000 years ago? How did his diary end up in the hands of the 8 Wastelands Emperor? It's rumored that Emperor Gu Lu was a legendary figure, even older than the 8 Wastelands Emperor. When Emperor Gu Lu roamed the Sea Realm, the 8 Wastelands Emperor had yet to appear. Has Emperor Gu Li's item been taken by the 8 Wastelands Emperor? Everyone discussed. They were all extremely surprised, and soon more and more people began to open the wooden boxes. Arg! Suddenly, a miserable cry rang out. An old man was rolling on the ground in pain as he clutched his head. The wooden box in his hand fell to the ground, and a blood-red book lay beside it, giving off a demonic aura. The sudden change attracted everyone's attention. Everyone's gazes gathered on the old man as they glanced at the book on the ground from time to time in shock. What is this book? It's so powerful. Let me have a look. A middle-aged man in gray robes casually picked up the book from the ground. However, just as his hand touched the book, his face suddenly changed. He immediately threw the book far away and clutched his head with both hands as he cried out in pain. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression became unquestionably solemn. They all stared at the books on the ground, and no one dared to touch them. At this moment, the old man's pain finally lessened a little. He stared at the blood-red book in fear and said with a trembling voice, "That's actually the cultivation method of the Blood Demon Emperor. There are remnants of the Blood Demon Emperor's aura of slaughter in there. My soul has already been injured by the aura of slaughter." As soon as they heard the name Blood Demon Emperor, many people became confused. Many of them had never heard of the name of the Blood Demon Emperor. A gleam of light flashed through Tesnik's eyes. He cried out in surprise, "What did you say? The Blood Demon Emperor? Are you sure it was left behind by the Blood Demon Emperor?" Tesnik's heart was in turmoil. He had only read about the legends of the Blood Demon Emperor in the ancient records of his clan. The Blood Demon Emperor was a supreme expert from 50,000 years ago. It was rumored that his strength had reached the level of an 18-star Poseidon warrior. He was extremely terrifying and was the greatest expert in the Sea Realm. He was even more powerful than the Hall Masters of the 3 Halls. The Blood Demon Emperor cultivated through slaughter. He was bloodthirsty and had stirred up a storm of blood in the Sea Realm back then. Countless experts of the 14th star or above had died to his hands, and there were even many 15th and 16th star experts. He was known as the Demon King of Slaughter. Back then, there were even people who suspected that if it wasn't for the fact that the Blood Demon Emperor was worried that he would trigger the 5 decay of Celestials, he might have even attacked the ordinary people in the sea region. Because slaughter was part of his cultivation. Only by unceasing slaughter would his strength grow. However, in the end, the 3 halls could no longer tolerate the Blood Demon Emperor's actions. The hall masters of the 3 halls took action together, engaging in a great battle with the Blood Demon Emperor in outer space. In the end, the Blood Demon Emperor died to the 3 hall masters. However, the 3 halls also paid a heavy price. The hall masters of the Poseidon Hall and the Serpent God Hall were heavily injured, while the hall master of the Heaven's Spirit Hall had died at the hands of the Blood Demon Emperor. As a result, the position of hall master of the Heaven's Spirit Hall had been vacant for 1,000 years. It caused a huge commotion in the sea realm. Tesnik told everyone about the legends of the Blood Demon Emperor, shocking them all. They were so shocked that they could not speak. No one dared to touch the book again, but they still stared at it closely as their hearts began to thump uncontrollably. This was the cultivation method of the Blood Demon Emperor. Once they obtained it, they would be able to cultivate the Blood Demon Emperor's supreme cultivation method. Just how tempting was that? Unfortunately, the Blood Demon Emperor's killing intent lingered on the book, so no one dared to touch it. This was because once the soul was injured, it would be very difficult to recover. It was extremely likely that it would leave behind lifelong problems, preventing them from breaking through. The scene fell into a deathly silence. Everyone stared at the book left behind by the Blood Demon Emperor. They were filled with regret. Chapter 924. Are we just going to watch as the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method is left here and miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? A saint ruler reluctantly asked. I don't dare to touch the Blood Demon Emperor's things either. If anyone wants it, feel free to take it, said Tisnek. He understood the Blood Demon Emperor's infamy extremely well. Let alone him, even a few Holy Emperor experts would not dare to touch a book that contained the Blood Demon Emperor's presence of slaughter. After all, the Blood Demon Emperor was an 18-star Poseidon warrior when he was still alive. The 3 hall masters had to work together to kill him, and they had to pay a heavy price to do so. Jianqin stared at the book on the ground. The light in his eyes flickered as his face became unsettled. After a moment of hesitation, he slowly made his way toward the book on the ground. Jianqin, what are you doing? You can't touch that book. Newbies immediately stopped Jianqin and tried to persuade him. Don't worry, I'll be fine, Jianqin gently replied. He did not stop at all. Newbies hesitated slightly when he saw how insistent Jianqin was, but he did not stop him. Instead, he silently followed behind Jianqin. If Jianqin encountered any danger, he would immediately stop him. Everyone in the surroundings stared at Jianqin. They all wanted to see whether the powerful ruler of the Turtle Clan could endure the presence of slaughter hidden in the book and obtain the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method. Jianqin sternly arrived before the book before slowly extending his hand toward it. At that moment, everyone's gazes were all focused on Jianqin's hand that was constantly approaching the book. They all stared at it without blinking. Finally, Jianqin's hand came in contact with the book left behind by the Blood Demon Emperor under the gazes of several dozen experts. Jianqin violently trembled. He immediately felt an extremely powerful killing intent enter his body through his fingers. It turned into a bone-chilling energy that passed through his body and rapidly approached his head. The killing intent was just too powerful. Jianqin felt like an ant before a mountain before it. He was unable to resist at all, as if just the strand of killing intent was enough to wipe out his soul. Jianqin was shocked. The Blood Demon Emperor was just too powerful. Just the strand of killing intent he had left behind in the book possessed such terrifying power. Jianqin did not doubt that even the 5th heavenly layer Holy Emperor would become heavily injured before the killing intent. Boom! The killing intent moved extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had entered Genshin's head and entered his sea of consciousness. Immediately, a violent rumble erupted in Genshin's head. At that moment, his entire sea of consciousness had been drowned by a dense, bloody mist. The bloody mist contained powerful killing intent, as if it wanted to forcefully shatter Genshin's sea of consciousness. What a powerful killing intent! The artifact spirit's voice rang out in Genshin's head. The golden tower in his sea of consciousness suddenly expanded, becoming 3,000 meters tall. It shone with a powerful golden light that protected Genshin's soul. At the same time, the sword spirits were still recovering from absorbing the energy from the 5-colored immortal crystal, moved as well. Violet and azure light illuminated the surroundings in his sea of consciousness. 2 divine swords vaguely appeared and directly slashed down at the mist. As the divine swords slashed down, an indescribable presence suddenly appeared. This was the trace of the great Tao, the laws of the world. The surrounding space trembled violently, falling into a state of chaos. Suddenly, a vast starry sky appeared here. Battle cries shook the heavens. Countless immortals were fighting in this unknown starry sky. Each of their attacks contained the power to destroy the heavens and earth, shattering countless planets in the surroundings. Next, 2 divine swords, one purple and one azure, flew out of the void. They charged into the crowd of immortals with devastating power. Immediately, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Countless powerful immortals died to the 2 swords. Golden blood splattered everywhere. Every single drop of blood possessed the power to kill the Holy Emperor. Immortal corpses filled the entire space. The saint artifact began to violently tremble. The artifact spirit hiding in the saint artifact clearly saw this and was filled with fear. The bloody mist that permeated Genshin's sea of consciousness seemed to be greatly frightened. It began to violently shrink before retreating at an even faster speed. It returned to the book and disappeared. Fortunately, this strand of slaughter chi has a certain level of intelligence. Otherwise, we really wouldn't be able to do anything to it. Master, try not to touch these things in the future. They're very dangerous. The sword spirits' voices rang out in Genshin's head. Earlier, the sword spirits had not used absolute strength to repel the strand of slaughter chi. Instead, they had used their abilities to project a few scenes of the past, creating a great deterrence to scare away the strand of slaughter chi. This method could not be used on people. It could only be used on spirits like the artifact spirit and the strand of slaughter chi that possessed some intelligence. This was because the sword spirits themselves were extremely powerful spirits. Although they were weak, they possessed an innate ability to suppress those of the same kind. The strand of slaughter chi retreated back into the book. It had already been frightened, so it disappeared from the book. It now feared Genshin. This time, Genshin was not affected at all. He looked at the book as if nothing had happened. His face was filled with surprise and doubt. Genshin had seen the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect before, so he was extremely familiar with their powerful, baleful Yin force. He had actually sensed an energy that was basically the same as the baleful Yin force from the strand of slaughter chi hidden in the book. However, the strand of slaughter chi within the book was far more powerful than the baleful Yin force. However, the 2 seemed to share the same origin, which surprised Genshin. Genshin continued to hold the book as if nothing had happened. This action stunned the surrounding people. They all stared at him in disbelief, but their attention soon shifted to the book in Genshin's hand. All of their eyes were filled with greed. Ruler of the Turtle Clan, has the strand of slaughter chi hidden in there disappeared? An expert could not help but ask. The Blood Demon Emperor can't have left behind a lot of strand of slaughter chi. After injuring 2 people, it must have completely dispersed. The ruler of the Turtle Clan was just lucky. He just happened to wait for the strand of slaughter chi to disperse before obtaining the book. A skinny old man indifferently replied, I think that's most likely the case. Ruler of the turtle clan, I was the one who obtained the book, and the strand of slaughter chi inside was only absorbed by me at the risk of injuring my soul. Shouldn't you return the book to me? The old man who had just received the book pleaded. Although he knew that the chances of success were close to zero, he was still unwilling to give it a try. Jianchen glanced at the old man before throwing the book to the ground without any hesitation. He nonchalantly said, If you want it, then take it. Seeing how Jianchen had actually thrown the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method to the ground in such a straightforward manner, the people in the surroundings who wanted to snatch it immediately paused. They had already sensed that something was off. However, the old man was not as calm. He immediately became overjoyed when he saw how Jianchen had returned the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method to him in such a straightforward manner. He immediately bent down and picked up the book. Arg! However, just when the old man's hand came in contact with the book, he immediately produced a painful cry. His soul had been heavily injured by the strand of slaughter chi in the book once again. His injuries had become even more severe. Everyone in the surroundings gasped at the sight of this. They secretly rejoiced that they had not tried to snatch the book recklessly, or they would have been the ones screaming right now. Jianchen coldly looked around and said, Who else wants the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method? Feel free to come and take it. I, Jianchen, will not stop you. Jianchen was fearless. He had already experienced the power of the strand of slaughter chi, so he understood that no one present could make the strand of slaughter chi fear him other than himself. Even the artifact spirit could only block the strand of slaughter chi and not repel it. Even with the protection of the Holy Emperor's treasures, all they could do was protect themselves. Looks like the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method belongs to the ruler of the Turtle Clan. Emoji smiled as he stood behind Jianchen. A sliver of intense jealousy was hidden in the depths of his eyes. Since no one is interested in the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method, I'll take it first. Jianchen picked up the book from the ground again. He was not affected by the strand of slaughter chi at all as he stowed it away in his space ring like nothing had happened. The strand of slaughter chi in Jianchen's sea of consciousness had already been frightened away by the sword spirits. It no longer dared to harm Jianchen. After everyone moved everything out of the treasure pavilion, they continued to the third floor of the palace. As soon as they set foot on the third floor, a surging sword chi surged toward them, causing them to feel a piercing pain on their faces. It was as if even the air there had been dyed by the sword chi becoming sharp. In the center of the palace, there was a huge sword that was 30 meters tall. It was stuck in a dried-up pool, giving off a great pressure. It also gave off an aura that seemed to look down on the world, as if it was the most powerful being in the world. This was a slender sword that had been enlarged over 10 times. Although the sword was a meter wide, it would only be 2 fingers wide if it was reduced to its normal size. Chapter 9:25. Heavens, what is such a huge sword? What kind of weapon is it? Why is the sword so huge? I've never seen or heard of such a huge sword ever since I was born. Who would be able to wield such a big sword? This sword is not to be underestimated. I can actually sense a powerful sword energy from it that makes me tremble in fear. There was nothing else on the third floor of the palace apart from the large sword stuck in the center. The sword stood there like a king, so it naturally attracted everyone's attention. Everyone's gazes gathered on the sword as they discussed spiritedly. Their faces were filled with shock. Basically, all of them knew about the existence of ruler armaments. Perhaps an extremely small number of them recognized king armaments, but there were extremely few people who recognized emperor armaments because they were just far too rare. Even on the Tianyuan continent, there were not many saint rulers who knew about the existence of emperor armaments, let alone in the sea realm where humans were rare. Jianchen, Do you think this sword is the legendary Emperor armament? Nubes' voice rang out from beside him. His gaze toward the Emperor armament was filled with great shock. He had never seen an Emperor armament before, but there were records of it in his inherited memories. Jianchen nodded slightly. His gaze toward the Emperor armament burned with desire. His desire to possess it became more and more intense. In his entire life, he had never felt such a strong desire to possess something. I have to obtain this Emperor armament, Jianchen thought. His gaze became extraordinarily determined. I know what it is. It's actually an Emperor armament, Tisnek suddenly cried out. Disbelief filled his eyes. He had also recognized the Emperor armament. Emperor armament? What Emperor armament? I've never heard of it before, an old man beside Tisnek asked in doubt. He was filled with curiosity. Tisnek sucked in a deep breath and slowly said, I've only learnt about the Emperor armament from my inherited memories. The Emperor armament is the saint weapon of the human emperor. It's extremely powerful, capable of destroying the world. When the human emperor reached the end of his lifespan, he left the saint weapon behind. What? Was the sword left behind by the human emperor? If that's the case, does the sword bear witness to the death of a human emperor? Heavens, it's actually the weapon of a human emperor. If I could use it, I wouldn't even need to fear 15th-star experts. Everyone was in an uproar. A weapon left behind by a great emperor of the human race was enough to make everyone jealous. Although the people of the sea race couldn't use the weapons of the human race for some reason, its value and preciousness were unquestionable. Suddenly, Tisnek turned to Jianchen. His gaze sharpened at that moment, and he said, Ruler of the Turtle Clan, you obtained a throne completely forged from god-tier crystal before obtaining the cultivation method of the Blood Demon Emperor. You've benefited far more than any of us, so I hope you won't interfere with this human emperor armament. Jianchen coldly stared at him and emotionlessly said, Do you really think the emperor armament is that easy to obtain? If you have the ability, then go take it. Jianchen could not help but think of the scene of him obtaining the saint weapon. The saint weapon had been left behind by a holy emperor, so it was much weaker than the emperor armament. However, he needed to push the power of the chaotic body to the limit in order to wield it, or he would only be injured by the weapon, let alone the emperor armament that was much more powerful than the saint weapon. Jianchen understood that it was probably impossible for him to touch the emperor armament with his current strength. Otherwise, he would not be able to avoid being injured by the weapon even with the protection of the chaotic body. Swish! At this moment, there were a few gusts of wind. A few experts could no longer resist the temptation and charged toward the emperor armament. A cold gleam of light flashed through Tesnik's eyes. He furiously roared, You're looking to die! With that, 2 blades immediately appeared in his hands as he pursued the people with heavy killing intent. Although Tesnik was very powerful, there were quite a few hidden experts present as well. Many of them did not fear him, not to mention that they were currently facing the great temptation of the emperor armament, so their fear for Tesnik was reduced to a minimum. As a result, the experts who charged for the emperor armament completely ignored Tesnik's words. Instead, they sped up. Many of the experts present could not help but become tempted when they saw that people had already begun to fight for the emperor armament. They wanted to join in as well, and even Mog Xiaowang and the others struggled to remain calm. However, Jianchen and Nubes stood there calmly. They did not plan on interfering at all. Even though that was the case, the 2 of them still stared at the emperor armament closely. Finally, the experts approached the emperor armament, but at this moment, a formation rapidly appeared on the ground. It flickered with a dazzling red light, and an invisible energy immediately permeated the air, blocking all the people who charged toward the emperor armament. They were just about to obtain the emperor armament, yet something like this happened at such a crucial moment. This made the experts who were close to the emperor armament go mad. They felt like a huge treasure had been placed right in front of them, yet they were unable to obtain it. This filled them with reluctance. Boom! Boom! Intense, rumbling sounds spread far and wide in the empty palace. The experts were doing their best to attack the invisible energy that was blocking them. They wanted to break through the barrier and obtain the god artifact. However, no matter how hard they tried, they were unable to break through the invisible energy that was blocking their path. This invisible energy was like an incomparably sturdy barrier blocking them outside. No matter how hard they tried, they were unable to take a single step forward. Tesniak's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He instinctively stopped and stared at the Emperor armament with a frown. However, his face sank very soon. He said with a heavy voice, "I never thought that the Emperor armament would actually be trapped by a seal. The requirements to break through the seal are actually so harsh. Looks like we'll have to pay a heavy price to obtain the Emperor armament." Jianqin slowly made his way toward the Emperor armament. When he approached it, a line of small words suddenly appeared before his eyes. When he glanced past the words, his face immediately became rather sunken. A cold light flickered through his eyes. "The Emperor armament has been sealed here. If you want to break through the seal, you'll need the lives of 49 experts." That was the content of the line of words. The other experts arrived one after another. All of them saw the small line of words carved on the ground. Their expressions changed, and they immediately scattered in all directions. They became even more vigilant. The atmosphere in the hall immediately became tense. Just at this moment, a series of footsteps rang out. Several dozen more experts walked over from the entrance to the third floor. They were all people who had been healing at the edge of the barrier. After several days, they had finally made a full recovery. When they saw the 30-meter-long sword, all of them became stunned. However, they learned about the Emperor armament and the method to break through the seal very soon, so they immediately became cautious. They gathered together in groups of 3 or 4 as they stared at the surroundings cautiously. The Emperor armament actually needs the lives of 49 experts to break through the seal. The Emperor of the 8 Wastelands clearly wants us to kill each other. Is the Emperor of the 8 Wastelands using this method to choose the strongest among us so that they can inherit his legacy? Someone guessed, but their guesses made everyone's eyes light up. They found it to be more and more likely the more they thought about it. Perhaps this really was how the Emperor of the 8 Wastelands chose the person who would inherit his legacy. The legacy of the 8 Wastelands belongs to me. I'll use this opportunity to get rid of some people so that they won't cause any more trouble in the future. A cold light flashed through Tesnick's eyes. He immediately swung his blades at the person closest to him. "Tesnick, what are you doing?" The expression of the expert drastically changed. He immediately retreated as he drew his weapon to block. Tesnick was the ruler of a clan, so his battle prowess was extremely great. Although he was still a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler, his battle prowess was no weaker than the Holy Emperor at the 1st heavenly layer. He could even rival the Holy Emperor at the 2nd heavenly layer. In just a few clashes, he had slain the expert, wiping out his soul. With the death of the expert, all his blood immediately fused into the ground and vanished. At the same time, one of the 49 inscriptions in the hexagram that trapped the Emperor armament had shattered. "I must obtain the Emperor armament. I'll kill anyone who gets in my way." A cold light flickered through Genshin's eyes as well. He immediately pulled out the Saint armament from his space ring and charged toward the 5 experts who stood together. As soon as Genshin struck out, newbies obviously did not want to fall behind. His hands immediately turned golden, and they flickered with excitement as they charged out as well. The Saint armament in Genshin's hand turned into a dense blur that enveloped the 5 experts. Even though the 5 of them put up a desperate fight, it was impossible for them to be Genshin's opponent. The Saint armament had only clashed with them a few times before heavily injuring them. They all staggered back, and before they could even stabilize themselves, A sword had pierced their foreheads, wiping out their souls. Jianqin took the space rings of the 5 of them before charging toward the next opponent. Battle intent burned in Nubis' eyes. He fought against 2 experts of the same level as him barehanded. His fists were filled with dense, poisonous gas, and golden threads would shoot out from them from time to time. In the blink of an eye, he had heavily injured the 2 of them before piercing their foreheads with the golden threads, wiping out their souls. In the blink of an eye, almost 10 experts had died in the hall. Every time an expert died, their blood would disappear into the ground. At the same time, one of the inscriptions in the hexagram would shatter. The palace fell into a chaotic battle. The peaceful, tacit understanding between the people had been broken. They began to fight with all kinds of motives. Among them, there was no lack of enemies or hostile forces with deep hatred. At this moment, they were all using this occasion to settle their grudges. Chapter 9:26. A tremendous pressure suddenly appeared. An expert had already begun to charge up a Tian-level saint technique. His 3 opponents were firmly tied down by his companions, giving him precious time to charge up his technique. The Tian-level saint technique was completed very quickly. It quickly locked onto the 3 opponents before being unleashed with devastating might. It directly reduced the 3 opponents to pieces, causing blood to spray into the air. More and more experts were dying as the battle raged on. The Tian-level saint techniques were unleashed one after another. Very soon, more than 30 experts had died. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, and even more were injured. The ruler of the Turtle Clan and Tiznik are far too powerful. They're the most troublesome opponents. Let's work together and surround them. We need to eliminate them, someone called out. Someone yelled out in the chaotic battle, immediately attracting the attention of many experts to Jianqin and Tiznik. That's right. We need to eliminate the 2 of them first, or the legacy of the 8 wastelands will end up in their hands in the end. In order to obtain the legacy of the 8 wastelands, we need to kill the ruler of the Turtle Clan and kill Tiznik. More and more people began to call out. None of them were stupid. They all understood that they needed to eliminate the 2 most powerful people if they wanted to obtain the legacy of the 8 wastelands. Immediately, over 40 experts began to charge toward Jianqin and Tiznik. Every single one of them was filled with killing intent. Another 4 people with Tian-level saint techniques hid far away and began to prepare their Tian-level saint techniques. Their targets were also Jianqin and Tiznik. You're looking to die. MOG. The 4 of you go deal with the people who have used the Tian-level saint techniques. Keep them busy, Nubis called out as killing intent surged in his eyes. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of poisonous gas that enveloped 100 meters around Jianqin. The poisonous gas possessed extremely powerful corrosive properties. Anyone who entered this region would be corroded by the poison. They were forced to divert a portion of their power to block the gas, which would affect their strength. Jianqin possessed the body of immunity, so he was especially immune to the venom of the silver-striped golden snake. As a result, he remained unscathed within the area enveloped by the venom. He was not affected at all. MOG and the other 3 did not interfere. The chaotic battle earlier had left them in a rather horrible shape. They gathered together and watched the battle from afar. They did not listen to Nubis and deal with the 4 people who had used the Tian-level saint techniques. Jianqin's eyes were cold. The saint weapon in his hand shone with a black light as it killed the 3 people at the very front with a devastating presence. Afterward, he charged out of the crowd as a blur. He used the illusory flash to shoot toward the people who had used the Tian-level saint techniques. At the same time, Tiznik charged out of the encirclement as well. He shot toward the 2 people who had used the Tian-level saint techniques with lightning speed. Whether it was Jianqin or Tiznik, the Tian-level saint techniques posed a huge threat to them. They needed to stop them as soon as possible. 2 of the 4 people who had used the Tian-level saint techniques targeted Jianqin, while the other 2 targeted Tiznik. As a result, Jianqin and Tiznik had an extremely clear division of labor. They only needed to eliminate the people who posed a threat to them. Seeing Jianqin and Tiznik charge over, the faces of the 4 people who had used the Tian-level saint techniques changed slightly. Immediately, the power of the Holy Emperor surged out from their bodies, condensing into armor on their bodies. At the same time, they rapidly retreated, wanting to put some distance between them and Jianqin and Tiznik. "How dare you use the Tian-level saint technique on me, Tiznik? Are you tired of living?" Tiznik had already approached the 2 people who had used the Tian-level saint technique on him. His twin blades transformed into 2 streaks of light as they slashed toward the 2 of them. At the same time, Jianqin approached his target as well. His emperor weapon turned into a streak of black light as it stabbed toward the foreheads of the 2 people. Tiznik's blade struck one of them, sending him flying. The Tian-level saint technique that was in the middle of charging up was forcefully interrupted. The other person's body was cut in 2, but no blood flowed out. His severed limbs quickly turned into stone. "It's actually the Stone Python clan's fossilized puppet technique," Tiznik said with a deep voice. He looked ahead and saw that the expert he had cut in 2 had already appeared 1,000 meters away, unscathed. He did not stop casting the Tian-level saint technique either. It had already reached its end. A tremendous pressure immediately descended from the sky, firmly locking onto Tiznik. On the other side, Jianqin's emperor weapon stabbed into the foreheads of the 2 people. The attack that was equivalent to the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor immediately shattered the armor condensed from the power of the Holy Emperor. Without giving them any time to catch their breaths, he stabbed out 2 more times with lightning-like speed, piercing their foreheads and wiping them out. Jianqin removed the space rings from their fingers and stowed them away without even looking at them. He looked at the hexagram array that sealed the Emperor armament and saw that 40 of the 49 inscriptions had already been destroyed. He only needed to kill 9 more people, and the seal would break. Jianqin was in no hurry to kill them. Instead, he looked at Tiznik. Now that the Tian-level saint technique had finished charging up, he wanted to see just how Tiznik would block it. Jianqin had already witnessed just how terrifying the Tian-level saint technique used by a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler was. It could even heavily injure a 2nd heavenly layer holy emperor, or even kill him. Even if Tiznik doesn't die this time, he'll be heavily injured. He's no longer a threat to us. Once he's injured, we'll work together and kill him. Eliminating a powerful opponent will greatly reduce our resistance in the fight for the legacy of the 8 wastelands. Quite a few people had such thoughts in their hearts as they looked at Tesniak with eyes full of schadenfreude. Tiznik's eyes were icy cold. He stared at the Tian-level saint technique that had finished charging up. At this moment, it was already too late for him to use the technique to block it. He snorted coldly. "Do you think you can kill me with the Tian-level saint technique? You underestimate me far too much. I'll show you how I destroy your Tian-level saint technique." A surging power of the Holy Emperor surged out from Tiznik's body. It was extremely powerful. A terrifying pressure immediately filled the entire hall as soon as it appeared. Just the energy was enough to suffocate many people present. This is the power that an expert on the level of a divine hall elder left on Tizniki. To think that Tizniki had such a terrifying power hidden within him, how is this possible? Tiznik's actually hiding such a great power, so Tiznik has been hiding his strength the entire time. This is probably his greatest trump card. Everyone was discussing spiritedly as they looked at Tiznik with solemn gazes. With the power left behind by the shrine elder, Tiznik undoubtedly had plenty of bargaining chips. If he did not exhaust this power, no one would be able to threaten him. This is power that only a 9th heavenly layer, Holy Emperor, can use. I wonder how much of the Holy Emperor's power is left in Tiznik's body. Jianqin stared closely at Tiznik as his face became unsettled. Tiznik was surrounded by powerful and pure Holy Emperor's power. It rapidly condensed into a meter-wide ball of energy before him under his control. Afterward, it shot towards the person who had used the Tian level Saint technique with lightning speed. At the same time, the expert unleashed the Tian level Saint technique that he had already charged up. A huge halberd appeared and shot towards Tiznik with devastating power. Bang! The Holy Emperor's power clashed with the Tian level Saint technique, immediately producing a violent explosion. Berserk shockwaves wreaked havoc in the surroundings, forcing the two combatants to retreat. A set of armor appeared on Tisnik's body. The ordinary Holy Emperor's power in his body had already been used up. This set of armor was condensed from the power of a ninth heavenly layer, Holy Emperor. It resisted the berserk shockwaves with the power of the armor. At the same time, with the point of his finger, a strand of the Holy Emperor's power shot out from his fingertip, directly shooting towards that expert. At this moment, that expert was continuously pushed back by the berserk shockwaves. He was unable to control his body at all. The armor condensed from the ordinary Holy Emperor's power had already dimmed. The Holy Emperor's power in his body had already been used up. He was simply unable to resist the even more powerful Holy Emperor's power shot by Tiznik. Spurt! The expert's forehead was pierced. As soon as the Holy Emperor's power entered his head, it exploded loudly, blasting his head to pieces. His soul was directly wiped out. Another one of the 9 remaining inscriptions in the Emperor armament's hexagram had shattered. Only 8 of them remained intact. A vicious light flickered in Tesniak's eyes. He ignored the space ring on the corpse and slowly turned his head to look at the group of people in the distance. His face was filled with killing intent as he roared, "Since you want to kill me, I, Tesniak, will not spare you." With a flash, Tiznik charged toward the group of people with lightning-like speed. He was actually challenging so many experts, all by himself. However, he was protected by the power of a 9th heavenly layer Holy Emperor, so the attacks of the regular experts were unable to do anything to him. In the blink of an eye, another 8 people died to Tisnik's hands. The remaining 8 inscriptions in the hexagram array shattered one by one. Boom! Suddenly, a violent rumble rang out. An extremely powerful sword chi suddenly appeared, filling the entire space in a mighty manner. It actually caused the entire divine hall to violently tremble. The sudden change interrupted Tesnik's slaughter. At that moment, everyone could not help but look in the direction of the sound. All they saw was the 30-meter-tall Emperor armament slowly rising from the ground, hovering in the air. It radiated with a presence that seemed to look down on the world, as if it was the greatest existence in the world. The seal on the Emperor armament has been undone. Go and steal the Emperor armament. Chapter 9:27. Even though many people had become bewildered by the allure of the Emperor armament, there were still a few people who did not take part in the fight. Instead, they watched from afar. Jianchen, newbies, and Xiaowang were one of them. MOG's group of 4 had charged over long ago. Newbies coldly stared at the 4 of them as they charged toward the Emperor armament. He gently said, "The 4 of them aren't anything good. Be careful." Jianchen nodded slightly and said nothing. At this moment, something strange happened. The divine emperor suddenly shone with a dazzling light. Afterwards, he actually attacked on his own without anyone controlling him. He turned into a streak of light and shot towards the group of people charging at him with unbelievable speed. Immediately, 3 saint rulers were unable to react in time. The emperor armament passed through their bodies, cleaving them in half with their noses as the center. They did not even have the time to cry out before their souls were wiped out. After passing through the 3 saint rulers, the emperor armament continued toward the walls of the palace without slowing down at all. In the end, it heavily struck the walls. Boom! With a deafening sound, the entire palace began to violently tremble. All the experts in the palace almost lost their footing and fell to the ground. With this, all the experts who had become bewildered by the emperor armament finally calmed down. They all stared at the Emperor armament in shock as disbelief flooded their faces. None of them would have thought that a weapon that no one was controlling would actually fly up on its own. Furthermore, it contained such terrifying power that it caused the entire palace to tremble. Boom! 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 The Emperor armament constantly struck the walls of the palace, producing violent booms. It caused the entire palace to tremble, but it was not damaged at all. Although it still possessed great power, it was nowhere near as powerful as the Holy Emperor. It could shake up the palace, but it could not destroy it. It wants to escape. Jianqin stared at the Emperor armament that constantly struck the walls of the palace as he softly murmured, "Does the Emperor armament possess a mind of its own?" Newbies asked curiously. He found it hard to believe. "I don't know, but I've heard about the legends of ruler armaments in the past. All ninth heavenly layer saint rulers will leave behind their saint weapons when they reach the end of their lifespan. The saint weapons contain a sliver of their vital energies, so they hope that they can be resurrected in the future," Jianqin said softly. Newbies' eyes narrowed. "Jianqin, are you saying that the reason why the Emperor armament is so intelligent is because of the Holy Emperor's soul hidden within the Emperor armament? The Holy Emperor is still alive?" Jianqin shook his head. With his hands behind his back, he raised his head and stared at the Emperor armament. He said, "I'm not sure either, but the Emperor armament is so powerful that it's not something I can control right now unless my strength increases." As soon as he said that, Jianqin's expression suddenly changed. He saw the powerful and sharp sword chi from the Emperor armament shoot toward where they stood. "Be careful, dodge." Jianqin cried out as he dodged into the distance as a blur. Newbies and Xia Wang, who had been paying attention to the Emperor armament at all times, did not slow down either. They dodged to the sides at the same time. Boom! The Emperor armament viciously struck the spot where the three of them stood. The violent ripples of energy blew the three of them away. "Arg! My arm!" Xia Wang cried out in pain. The Emperor armament was just too fast. He was slightly slower in dodging, so his entire left arm was chopped off. Blood spurted out like a fountain from his severed arm. The Emperor armament did not continue to attack Jianqin, Xia Wang, and Xia Wang. As soon as it struck the ground, it immediately shot into the sky, striking the ceiling of the hall heavily before turning back and continuing to shoot toward the ground. This time its target was actually the experts scattered in the surroundings. "Run!" The experts all paled in fright. They used everything they had to escape from the Emperor armament's range of attack. However, the Emperor armament was just too large, so its range of attack increased by a lot. Another expert died to the Emperor armament because he was unable to dodge in time. The Emperor armament was like a headless fly, smashing around in the hall. It became extremely agitated as it tried to break through the tough walls and escape. Under its aimless attacks, all the experts in the hall suffered greatly. They all fled for their lives in horrible shapes. Very soon, several experts died to the Emperor armament while over a dozen people were injured. Tisnike stared at the Emperor armament closely. He was extremely stern. Soon after, the surging power of the Holy Emperor surged out of his body once again, forming a set of armor that protected every inch of his body, only leaving his eyes exposed. The armor on his hands was even thicker than before. Tisnike leapt up and quickly arrived at the hilt of the Emperor armament. He directly opened his arms and tightly hugged the thick hilt in an attempt to subdue the Emperor armament. The Emperor armament suddenly paused before a powerful sword chi erupted. It enveloped Tesnik as a dazzling white light. With a series of cracking sounds, Tesnik's armor was immediately covered in slashes, covering his entire body. The defense of the armor was rapidly being weakened. Reluctance filled Tisnike's eyes. He suddenly bellowed out, and the power of the Holy Emperor surged out of his body, replenishing the energy of the armor. A space ring appeared in his hand, and he wanted to put the Emperor armament in there. The Emperor armament immediately resisted. refusing to enter the space ring. No matter how hard Tisnike tried, he was unable to put the Emperor armament into the space ring. Unable to break free from Tisnike's entanglement, the Emperor armament charged through the palace with Tisnike. It constantly smashed into the surroundings, and the huge force of the recoil stacked on Tisnike, tormenting him to the point of excruciating pain. If it were not for the armor, his organs would have been reduced to dust long ago. Even with that being the case, it was still very painful for Tisnike. Many experts in the palace suffered as well. All of them were reduced to horrible shapes by the Emperor armament that was flying around. They suffered heavy casualties, with less than 20 people still alive. Half of them were injured as well. Tisnike's power of the Holy Emperor had been severely depleted, so he could not last much longer. He reluctantly let go of the hilt of the Emperor armament. However, the Emperor armament did not stop there. It continued to fly around the palace, constantly smashing into the surroundings and producing deafening booms, causing the palace to constantly tremble. God damn it, the Emperor armament has basically gone mad. Newbies arrived before Jianqin. He stared at the Emperor armament as he panted slightly. He angrily cursed. The Emperor armament had left behind a bone-deep wound on his back. Jianqin remained silent. He stared at the Emperor armament closely. He then opened his hand, and a golden light immediately shot out from his forehead, landing in his hand. It turned into a palm-sized golden pagoda. Right now, he could only use a saint artifact to successfully subdue the Emperor armament. As for the sword spirits, their current strength was not enough to fend off the Emperor armament. If the Emperor armament had produced an artifact spirit, it would obviously be intimidated by the sword spirits. However, Jianqin knew that it was impossible for the Emperor armament to produce an artifact spirit. It was extremely likely that it was a sliver of the Holy Emperor's soul. At this moment, the Emperor armament turned and shot toward Jianqin again. Newbies let out a strange cry. He did not dare to hesitate at all, immediately dodging far away. However, Jianqin did not choose to dodge this time. Instead, he stood there calmly, waiting for the Emperor armament to arrive. Just when the Emperor armament was 10 meters away from Jianqin, a white light suddenly appeared. Jianqin had already notified the artifact spirit to open the door to the saint artifact. When the 30-meter-long Emperor armament shot into the white light, it immediately vanished, having entered the artifact space by itself. Newbies, protect the saint artifact well, Jianqin said to newbies through a communication technique before entering the artifact space himself. The artifact spirit that had been waiting in the artifact space had already begun fighting the Emperor armament in the air. The artifact spirit was the absolute ruler of the artifact space, a true expert of the Holy Emperor. Even though the Emperor armament was very powerful, it was still a weapon in the end, so it was no match for the artifact spirit. It was subdued by the artifact spirit without any effort at all. It was currently firmly gripped by a huge hand conjured by the artifact spirit. No matter how the Emperor armament struggled, it was unable to break free. In the blink of an eye, the arrogant Emperor armament had entered the artifact space by accident and fallen into the hands of the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit used the power of the saint artifact to suppress the Emperor armament, stopping it from struggling. It then arrived before Jianqin and politely said, "Master, I've already suppressed the Emperor armament. However, the Emperor armament is very powerful. You probably won't be able to control it with your current strength." Jianqin did not mind at all. Excitement filled his face as he said, "There's no rush. I'll be able to use it very soon. Once my chaotic body breaks through to the third layer, I'll have enough power to control it. I just wonder how much my battle prowess will increase once I reach the third layer." Jianqin was filled with anticipation. At the same time, he secretly swore that he would break through as soon as possible once he left the divine hall of the 8 wastelands. "Artifact spirit, I'll leave the Emperor armament here. Look after it for me. I'll be heading out first." Jianchen did not dare to remain in the artifact space for too long, since the dangers outside had yet to be dealt with. He left very soon. When Jianchen emerged from the artifact space, he saw newbies and Xiaowang surrounded by over a dozen experts who had managed to survive. Every single one of them was hostile. Jianchen had expected a situation like this long ago. As a result, he was not too surprised. He first accepted the saint artifact from newbies before looking at Xiaowang. He said, "Xiaowang, don't resist. I'll send you into the artifact space. Your arm will recover completely there." Immediately, a milky white light shot out from the saint artifact and enveloped Xiaowang. Xiaowang did not resist. He was instantly sucked into the artifact space by the power of the saint artifact. Afterward, the saint artifact turned into a golden streak of light and shot into Jianchen's forehead before disappearing. Seeing this, Tesnik and the other experts immediately became stunned. They all stared at Jianchen's forehead with a strange light in their eyes. Disbelief filled their faces. They had never seen something like this before, nor had they ever dared to imagine that something could be stored in a person's head. Moreover, it was such a large pagoda. They could not help but feel curious. They had no idea how such a huge golden pagoda had managed to make its way into the forehead. What had happened before them had completely overturned everything they knew. "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, what is that golden pagoda of yours? It's so wondrous." Tesnik stared at Jianchen closely as he asked curiously. A sliver of extremely well-hidden greed appeared in the depths of his eyes. "Tesnik, may I ask what is the meaning of this?" Jianchen glanced past everyone with a sharp gaze. He answered with a question instead of an answer. His voice was cold. Tesnik became slightly angered when he heard that. He growled, "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, I'd like to properly ask you about this. Not only did you obtain the huge god-tier crystal on the first floor, which is priceless, but you also obtained the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method on the second floor. You've benefited far more than any of us, yet you've shamelessly taken away the Emperor armament on the third floor. Aren't you going a little too far?" Towards the end, Tesnik's voice could not help but become sharper. He had paid a huge price for the Emperor armament. He had used up so much of the Holy Emperor's power that even made his heart ache. That was no ordinary Holy Emperor's power, but something left behind by a Hall Elder. It was extremely precious. After paying such a huge price, not only did he fail to obtain the Emperor armament, it had even ended up in Jianchen's hands. How could he not be furious? Jianchen's face sank. His gaze became extremely sharp in a single moment as he stared at Tesnik. He coldly said, "Tesnik, please watch your words. You didn't have the ability to subdue the Emperor armament, so you can only blame yourself for not being strong enough. You can't blame anyone else. Are you going to stop others from taking it if you can't take it?" Tesnik's face sank as well. He stared at Jianchen fearlessly and gritted his teeth. "All right, it's me who didn't have the ability to subdue the Emperor armament. However, ruler of the Turtle Clan, let me give you a piece of advice. I hope you don't regret it. Some treasures aren't that easy to use." Jianchen sneered disdainfully. "I, Jianchen, have never regretted my actions. However, Tesnik, I must warn you that it's best if you don't threaten me. Or do you believe that you'll end up like them and never be able to leave the Divine Hall?" Jianchen's voice was filled with heavy killing intent. He wanted to kill Tesnik. Tesnik's eyes suddenly narrowed. He snorted coldly and said nothing more. He turned around and left, making his way to the fourth floor. His gaze had already been replaced by coldness as he thought, "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, let's just wait and see. We still don't know who'll end up as a corpse here." After Tesnik's departure, the other experts all left as well. They all maintained a certain distance from each other as they made their way to the fourth floor. In the end, only MOG and the other two remained. The other person had already died to the Emperor armament. "Ruler, Tesnik is not simple. You have to be careful. MOG acted like he was concerned. His face was filled with worry for Jianchen. Jianchen only nodded in response to MOG's concern. He did not say anything else before calling out to newbies and making his way to the 4th floor. The three of them looked at each other. They could obviously sense that Jianchen's attitude towards them had changed slightly. The three of them hesitated before silently following Jianchen to the 4th floor in the end. Humph, that Tesnik sure is arrogant. If it weren't for the fact that we were running low on people and that we might need them to break through the barrier later, the great newbies, would have killed him long ago, Newbies said through gritted teeth as he walked.